know exist. It's like a perk in the talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look me better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 8th part of What If Deku Helps His Best Friend, Peter Parker. Smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Looked like the blue team was getting along as well as it could with Bakugo on their team. He prayed that such discord would continue. Shoto stared down at the armband in his hand. A rather simple thing, but he guessed that was the point. Wouldn't be too hard to take it off anyone. Again, probably the point. Wrapping the band around his upper arm on his right side, he saw that Bakugo was doing much the same. The blonde had been smiling ever since the teams were announced. His look was disturbing to say the least, but Shoto paid it no mind. A single target in the center of an enclosed space that he couldn't leave unless his band was taken. Parker was practically sitting there, waiting for an attack, daring him. Considering that Yaoyorozu was nearby, they would probably hold out in one of the buildings like they did in the training exercise. They'd beaten him back then, but things would be different this time. He wouldn't just flash freeze the building. He would destroy it with one giant glacier. With his old man watching, there was no point in holding back. If someone got caught, it didn't matter. Even with the judges, only the knights truly mattered. If anyone wanted to take his, they were welcome to try. Shoto pulled the armband tight, rotating his shoulder a few times to make sure he had ease of movement. Alright everyone, let's bring our heads together. Shoto glanced up at the speaker. Kendo Itsuka, the class representative of 1B if he remembered correctly. Indeed Kendo-san, Ida said, adjusting his glasses, I suggest forming a defensive perimeter. When the red team comes to attack us, we can utilize superior terrain and catch them. Fuck that. Uraraka eeped as Bakugo blasted the rock he was sitting under to smithereens. His eyes had a bloodshot madness to them that Shoto knew all too well. The eyes of someone so frustrated that all logic was thrown out the window for a single, obsessive goal. I'm not waiting. That fucking redshirt has sat too pretty for too long. His ass is mine, and I'm not waiting for anyone to come to me before I blast that brat to kingdom come. He gritted his teeth, baring them. Shoto rolled his eyes. Of course he would have his reasons for going after Parker, petty as they were. Not that he was in any state to throw stones. At the very least, Bakugo would serve as a good distraction. So you're just going to throw yourself against a dozen of our classmates and what? Walk out of there with all the armbands? Kendo asked incredulously, crossing her arms. And what if I do? Bakugo asked, turning to the orange-haired girl. I betcha I can. He smirked darkly at her. To her credit, the rep of Class 1B didn't even flinch. And what if you get your ass laid flat on the concrete because you couldn't see a punch coming? Kendo countered, they get an armband, and we lose one of our knights and are down 20 points. I'd pay good money to see that. The lizard-like girl grumbled on the side, sitting on a rock with her chin cupped in her hands. What did you say? Bakugo roared at the girl. She only seemed to grin widely, knowing that she had struck a nerve. His hand popped with explosions, but Tetsu immediately stepped in between them. He crossed his arms, and his skin turned to metal as he puffed up his chest and stared Bakugo down. She said exactly what she wanted to say, got that. Tetsu growled, looking down at the blonde. Bakugo's hands twitched, letting out another, far louder pop. You got something to say, you metal freak. The metallic boy snarled and was about to retort before a voice cut him to the punch. No, but I'm sure I can speak for him. Every head turned to the source of the interruption. The other blonde boy with well-kept hair, all but strutting to the center of their little group. Bakugo glared at him, leading to the two blondes to stare one another down, one with a sneer, and the other with a cocky little smirk. What the hell do you want? Nothing much, the other blonde mentioned. Nido-kun, Kendo pressed, this isn't the time. Planning? Now, really? The blonde named Nido asked. I believe this is the perfect time. After all, we're trusting one of the most important things in this little tournament to him. And frankly, I don't trust him. Bakugo jerked. You think I'm gonna get taken out by a bunch of extras? He growled, fists quivering. Yes, actually I do, Nido said, his smirk widening. You intend to go straight for the king, Parker, right? The edges of Bakugo's mouth twitched. Yes, did y'all not hear what I said a few fucking seconds ago? Nido casually shrugged, a move that came as a surprise to Uraraka and the floating uniform that was Hagakure. He didn't show any fear or irritation at Bakugo's attitude and aggressiveness. He almost seemed to welcome it even. I understand, except that I heard through the grapevine that that particular king, Parker-san. He has you beaten in every category, hasn't he? Uraraka and Kirishima gasped at the declaration. Even Hatsune looked up from her project to give the conversation a once-over. Zero winced, and even Kendo looked at Nito like he was insane. Bakugo was deathly still, eyebrow twitching. Care to repeat that? Easy now guys, we got a plan here. Kirishima tried to calm them down, feeling the temperature rise up in the clearing. Umanoma, I know you hate Wanna, but is this going a bit too far? Setsuna asked. We're supposed to be on a team here. You know, enemy of my enemy is my friend and all that. That won't work here, Setsuna. Hirorio muttered, correcting her. Not with him. What? It's a fact, isn't it? Nito asked innocently. I mean, you heard the people right. First year Phenom. The golden boy. His eyes flicked over to Kirishima. Ace, and what of you? For someone who seems to be quite so angry at him, I bet you want to be the best. To aim for the top, but the fact of the matter is, his smirk broke out into a smug grin. You couldn't even break into the top 5. Enough, Shoto hissed, standing up and conjuring an ice wall to come between the seething Bakugo and a surprised Monoma Nito. He walked up, eyes glaring into them both. Midnight said that this competition is more than just win or lose, and us yelling at each other won't do us any favors. I suggest you keep whatever superiority complexes you have to yourselves. He glowered before walking away. Todoroki-kun, where are you going? Uraraka called out, Shoto leaving with his hands in his pockets. I already have a plan. I'll end this game within a few minutes. He had his eyes on the target building, specifically at the top. There, where the red team's king was. Shoto looked back, seeing Tenya stand in his own ring that was surrounded by a clearing of rocks and boulders with the laser bowl. You ain't gonna take his armband. I am, icy hot. Bakugo barked, departing after him despite the cries from Kendo and his other peers. Before long they were walking side by side, eyes forward. Unlike you, I have fought him before, so if you don't want your flag to be taken like a fool. Shoto turned his head, his gray eye boring a hole into Bakugo's head. I suggest you help with finding and attacking the other Silver Knights, or at the very least help with defense. Go to hell, you two-faced bastard. Bakugo sneered. I'll win my own way, not yours. Use that cute ice sculpting skill of yours and make a wall. That makes 2 of us. And with that said, the 2 glowering teens continued to march through the hodgepodge mix of buildings and boulders, eyes set on the tower far ahead. Those 2. I can't believe this, Itsuka yelled, sighing before turning to Nito, her deputy representative and resident headache. What is your problem? Those are 2 of our Silver Knights and you made them go right into the front lines when the bell starts. Come on Kendo-chan, we both know that those 2 are better on offense than defense. Nito responded, smirking all the while. They'll throw themselves against the enemy while our team collects the flags and then holds out. He turned towards Setsuna who waved. I trust that you'll help with matters. Oh yeah, leave it to me. She smirked. Kendo looked at the greenette who noticed her gaze and winked. True, Setsuna was very good at stealth. Along with Hagakure they could infiltrate any part of the Blue Kingdom and find a Silver Knight. Me and Hagakure-san can sneak around and find any flags. After that we can make a ruckus and those 2 hotheads will come running, I bet. Are you sure that this is a good idea, leaving those 2 alone? They may get overwhelmed. Hagakure waved her glove in concern. Besides, if we get Parker-kun's flag, he gets involved in the battle. As would I, Ida declared. Don't forget about me now. I'm pretty sure that those 2, Kiwaro muttered lightly, will be fine on their own. Monoma's right. Those 2 have a lot of power, but I doubt they can be reined in. Still, I'm a bit concerned. They have Yaoyorozu on their team, and Uraraka was abruptly shoved to the side by Hatsune. Have no fear, my teammates. Behold. She looked like she had just run a marathon, lugging a cart of sorts. I made some extra babies for just this occasion. She opened the lid, revealing an assortment of devices and gadgets inside. In case I was able to make it through to the next round, I spent an all-nighter on these the other day. Naiha. Zero flinched while Ashido stepped forward, inspecting some of the gear. Gloves, boots, vests and goggles galore. Did you get any sleep at all? He asked, unsure of what to make of the support course girl who had run into the locker room to get her gear. As a member of the support course, she was able to use any gadgets she made during the sports festival in order to catch up with the hero course students. And there wasn't anything in the rules against dispersion of said gear in case of a team exercise. Nope, Hatsune declared, showing off an assortment of gear. Now put them on. I'll explain their functions and then we can get to work. I'll explain our plan here, since Bakugo and Todoroki clearly want no part of this. Itsuka rolled her eyes. We need to assault Parker's stronghold, at least enough to act as a diversion. Parker-san cannot leave his king's ring at the top of the tower. That means we need a strike team in order to have his attention and their team's other defenders. Leave it to me. I wanna have a go at ace myself. Kirishima raised his hand, as did Tetsu. Huh? Why are you coming with? What? You think I'd let you hog that guy to yourself? Parker's an okay guy, but I gotta beat him. He's in Class A. I should go with him. Ashido patted Itsuka on the back, and the Orangette was glad that the Pinkette had a semblance of a brain. I've known Kirishima-kun for a long time. Chemistry may go a long way for us. I agree, Shihai uttered, standing up from his perch. Kendo-san, let me stick to defense. The sun is getting higher in the sky. He looked up, eyes narrowed. It'll be hard for me to use my shadows on offense. Plus, we've worked together on those obstacle courses Vlad-sensei made for us. A smart ploy, Shihai-kun, Nito drawled. Then I'll assist with the offense as well. With any luck, Bakugo and Todoroki should be close enough for me to use my quirk. Is it just me though, or do we have little room for defense? We have a stealth team, a small group for attackers and defenders, and then we have Todoroki and Bakugo. We're gonna be stretched a little thin here, Shiro said aloud in concern before Itsuka turned, her green eyes twinkling. She looked over at Uraraka, Ibara, and Kaminari. Our numbers are few, but I have a feeling that our defense is pretty stout. Uraraka, if you can use your gravity quirk on the boulders to help block the various choke points or flank areas, that would be helpful. Ibara-san. The vine-haired girl who had remained silent and stoic perked up, ignorant of the way Kaminari was blushing near her. Can I have you patrol the perimeter of the boulders around the King's Ring? I am appalled at the idea of inflicting harm to another in the name of sport, but if I am to become a hero, I must do what is needed and not what I want, Ibara declared, hands interlocked. I only hope that this game is not as combative as a war. War is truly a heinous and sad thing to witness, as our Lord must be grieving for us high in heaven. But if I must aid in the defense of our ring, then I will. Kaminari and Shiro sighed. Wow, her voice is so angelic. The tape user finished, and Itsuka chuckled. Shiro-kun, Kaminari-kun, you two are our remaining knights, what with Kirishima-kun leading the attack on Red Team's fortress. Itsuka put on a pair of hover soles that Hatsune provided. We need you to hang back here in our zone, most importantly near the King's Ring, so that myself, Ibara-san, Uraraka and Hatsune-san can come rescue you. Can you do that? Wait, hang on. Kaminari looked at his black-haired friend, grinning. Are we in the care of 3 girls? 2 cute ones at that. Shiro nodded, arms crossed and grinning. Kendo quirked an eyebrow, smirking in amusement. Setsuna seemed to share her enthusiasm. And who is the other? Chopped liver. Uraraka didn't seem to care, and Kendo was glad that she didn't lose her temper like most girls in the various rom-com manga that she read from time to time. Speaking of which, this week she was gonna binge read that new manga by Hayao Araki. But first, gotta focus on the festival. Heck no, Kaminari roared, before waving his hands and bowing. For it is she, and her divine grace and baritones blessed by the gods on high. Long may she reign, he spoke in a lower, fragile and subdued tone. Kendi could just about see the light of heaven shining upon him. Ibara could only tilt her head in confusion. There is only one god. I do not know what you speak of, Kaminari-san. I am not worthy. The blonde electric user covered his eyes, being overly dramatic with an arm draped over his sight. Shiro didn't seem all too affected. I like her too, dude, but you may I'd be pushing it too hard. The long arm tape user laughed. Nah, let the guy dream, Setsuna added. Anyways, Hagakure-chan, let's get ready. Wanna go as a team? Sure thing. Hagakure waved, and the invisible girl began to walk away with Setsuna. We'll be back with some flags. We're going to hide somewhere close to the half line. Setsuna waved. Itsuka turned towards her defense team as Tenya stood calmly in his ring. Uraraka, Ibara, Shiro, Kaminari, Hatsune, and Kiwaro. She could work with this. Alright then. She turned, looking out towards the building that Peter Parker was sitting on. She thought that Parker was a decent guy, one she kinda wished was in her class. She could use a cooler head as a deputy representative. Nito-kun could be charismatic, whenever he wasn't making a fool of himself. Let's go show the pros what we've got. Ida-kun, leave the defense to us and have a seat. Itsuka grinned. Very well, I am in your care. 1 minute until the war begins. And the timer began to count down from 59 seconds as the orange-haired martial artist licked her lips. Why was there always a countdown? There weren't countdowns in real life. If heroes didn't show up in time, everything would go to hell, and Lord knows how many lives would be ruined. On second thought, considering the members of the hero course, it wasn't too far out there to expect that of them. Shinso Hitoshi had a lot of thoughts on the current resident members of the hero course, and all of them boiled down to one word: special. Every single one of them was seemingly born with a quirk perfectly suited to some kind of facet of mainline hero work. Big flashy powers that packed a punch, fast powers that would let them run straight into danger, even silent quirks that were perfect for getting in and out with every secret an enemy would want to hold on to. He had to prove to the world that he was special too. How else could he make his dream of being a hero come true? If it meant ousting one of Parker's classmates to do so, so be it. Or maybe a spot in Class B, he'd be fine with that too. Not that he could complain about his current team. For all of the ego rumored to pour out of the hero course, the current team was workable. He was honestly expecting Parker to stick him on defense or just tell him to hide. Instead, he let him go to the front lines without even knowing his quirk. Pretty stupid when Hitoshi thought about it, way too trusting. But again, he could work with that. If he had enough faith in a general ed kid like him to have come this far, what else could he do but to prove himself worthy? Only fair I repay that faith in kind, he muttered under his breath as he exited the building. He made his way to the far edge of the arena, hugging whatever cover he could find until he could see the rocky edge of the blue team's field. Except, he didn't stop there. There were plenty of boulders to serve as cover on the other side, options that he exploited instantly. After all, the ref never said anything about going over into enemy territory before the countdown started. It was just implied. Cunning and strategy earned people recognition, right? So who cares if someone got a little head start? Heroes were supposed to get everything they had on a villain before circumstances went from bad to worse. The crowd roared their approval, and Hitoshi glanced up to see Parker posing on the edge of his ring. The big shot of the hero course gave a peace sign before the display turned back to its timer. He kept going, walking a bit further till he heard the faint sounds of voices. He peeked out of his corner as much as he dared, and saw a head of blonde and black hair nervously looking at the countdown. Hitoshi couldn't help but grin. This was going to be way too easy. As the final 10 seconds counted down, the entire stadium seemed to hold its breath. No one moved, everyone stood ready. Kirishima clenched his fist, preemptively hardening himself as the final seconds ticked down. Next to him, Tetsu of Class 1B bared his teeth and entered his metal form. On his other side, Bakugo's eyes had a focus that most men would dream of having. His finger twitched, an explosion popping off. Behind him, Todoroki said nothing, his eyes twitching towards the stands for one reason or another. Then the timer hit 0, Midnight's voice booming out. The alarm blared, with the crowd roaring as it did so. Let the war begin. And before she was even finished, Ijiro, Tetsu, Todoroki and Bakugo were already moving. Bakugo took point, sprinting forward. But why was he holding back on the explosions? Why are you not blasting off there, Bakugo? Ijiro asked. You think I'm an idiot? Bakugo screamed back as the team passed into the enemy field. I'm only here to teach Redshirt a lesson. I'm not wasting any time fighting extras. That's what you're here for. Ijiro swore he heard Todoroki huff, and next to him, he noticed Tetsu grit his teeth. You know, if we weren't on the same team, I'd kick your ass. You'd try? Bakugo called back, his gaze firmly focused on the road ahead. How about we give it a try first? All four of them looked up just as two members of the red team leapt down from the buildings above. The green-haired heteromorphic kid grinned as he came down right on top of Ijiro, his hand extending out into a sword. Ijiro threw his hands up and saw sparks erupt on his hardened skin. Kamakiri Tagaru snarled as he pushed Kirishima away, and the redhead was on the defensive. Bursting through the wall of a building like some parody of the Kool-Aid Man, Sen thrust his drill hands straight at Tetsu, forcing the boy to dodge or get pummeled. Sen, what the hell are? Dark Shadow. Bakugo stopped mid-motion, his eyes darting to the corner as the shadowy bird of Tokoyami's quirk reared out. He rushed forward to strike, but Todoroki threw an ice wall in front of him, forcing the bird construct to slam into it. He screamed something else to Todoroki, but Kirishima couldn't tell what it was. Kamakiri's sword swept at his hair, probably trying to get him to dodge to the left. But Kirishima's quirk was made for situations like this. He willed the hardening over his fingers and grasped the swords in each hand. Sorry bud, but you're not cutting this guy, Ijiro grinned, but it still used almost everything he had to keep the swords in place. Yeah, you're not half bad. Kamakiri screamed, grinning back, a blade forming out of his forehead as he went in for a headbutt, one that Kirishima met with his own. The two boys grappled in a deadlock, neither of them willing to give ground. The two never looked away, the battles of those around them irrelevant to their struggle. Only, Kamakiri wasn't as strong as he hoped. With the surprise over, Kirishima slowly bent the swords back, pushing against the reptilian blade user. He grinned when Kamakiri grit his teeth, trying and failing to hold his opponent back. Reeling back, Kirishima threw an enhanced headbutt, shattering the sword on the boy's head and sending him stumbling back, giving Kirishima plenty of space to throw a clean right hook at the boy's face. Shishida Jirota charged forth, bursting through Todoroki's ice and jumping into the melee as Tetsu parried blows from his classmate. Now this is real low, Tetsu yelled before backing off. Shishida pounded the ground he was on a moment ago before charging on all fours. A spray of acid onto the ground coated his hands, making him bark in pain and lose his footing, rolling to the ground in a heap. Take this. Mina swung her hands, acid splashing out as she aimed. Ijiro and Kamakiri's deadlock was broken as the lizard boy had to fall back. Kirishima saw some acid leak and burn the ground. Mina, be careful, he yelled, the pinkette blushing in mortification. Sorry, LMB. You're open. Takoyami came in, dark shadow striking Mina and sending her sprawling to the ground. Kirishima grit his teeth and charged against the raven-headed boy, yelling as he leapt up. Takoyami looked back, nonplussed. Look out, copycats, yelled Tetsu before Kirishima felt a punch impact his arm. The boy grunted as he was sent flying, Shishida recovering as he decked the redhead. Kirishima recovered, landing near Mina and helping her up. Kamakiri charged, swinging his blade hands until Tetsu got in the way, parrying them with his steel arms and ducking a strike before the silverette punched his lizard peer in the face, launching him off his feet. You okay, copycats? Tetsu yelled, hands raised in a boxer's stance. Kirishima sharpened his skin as he saw Sen and Shishida approach. Mina was at his back. I'm fine. Hey, where's Bakugo and Todoroki? Ijiro felt himself sinking. The ground felt like thick mud, yet it was consuming him like quicksand. Mina gasped beside him. What a start. The red and blue teams have begun their clash near the halfway point, and blue team's advance party seemed to have split up. Present Mike yelled. Kirishima perked up. Bakugo, you jerk. Ijiro yelled. Of course he would dump them and go off on his own. So where in the hell was Todoroki? He saw a shadow loom overhead, and he looked up to see that dark shadow was gunning for his arm. Where his armband was, Kirishima swatted at the dark construct, but the monster simply held onto his arms and extended its neck, grabbing his armband by its beak. Return, Takoyami commanded as dark shadow reeled in its target and Kirishima felt his blood chill. Shit. Oh no, Mina exclaimed. Damn it, that's a dirty play Honunki. Tetsu cursed. Get up to the ring now, Kamakiri yelled as Takoyami retreated, taking the armband into his hands as Dark Shadow helped him scale the building quickly. What a move by the Reds. The attackers had a silver knight with them, and they're paying the price. Takoyami is heading towards his ring with a flag. Juzo swam under the arena, holding his breath as he kept going forward. Using his softening quirk, he was able to neutralize the blue assault group long enough for his red teammates to get an opening. Kendo was foolish to have a silver knight not named Todoroki or Bakugo be a part of the strike force. He came up for air, looking around to get a clue on his position. The ash blonde saw some buildings and boulders around him. Juzo quickly glanced back, seeing his teammate Takoyami climb up the building towards the king's ring where Parker was. He saw an exploding dart chasing after him, or more specifically where Parker was on the building. He grabbed his walkie-talkie. Guys, Bakugo's converging on Parker. He's ignoring Takoyami. No sign of Todoroki anywhere either. He whispered, leave him to me. It was Yaoyorozu's voice. The countermeasure is ready. Peter-san, I'll toss one up. You need to get to the center of the circle. Right? Parker replied, sounding calm despite the rampaging Silver Knight gunning for him. Juzo smirked. Damn, wish I had you in my class. He muttered before taking a deep breath, going back under. He has a job to do, and that was to win. Shoto departed from the main group, wanting to get in position to assault Parker without getting caught up in the melee. They had the red team's attention. Now he could commence his assault. He bent down, ice gathering below as it ruptured the earth. He looked up, seeing Parker looking down from the ledge. A shadow being cast over him made the Silver Knight pause, and charging down with a dive kick was Midoriya Izuku, covering in green lightning. Shoto jumped out of the way, seeing Midoriya strike the earth. His arm went to his band as he covered it in ice. Right on time too, Asui's tongue smacked it and sent Shoto flying back a couple of meters. He landed on his feet, seeing Asui atop a lamppost. He narrowed his eyes, bending down and conjuring an ice pillar to push him away from a charging Midoriya. The poor boy jumped away, green lightning arcing out and licking against the wall of ice. He skidded to a stop on the ground, wincing from the impact. Shoto readied another blast, only to jump back as Asui flung a rock the size of his entire body straight at him. It cracked the ground in the space that he had been standing in just a moment ago. When he finally got his bearings, both of the enemy Silver Knights were rushing towards him. He glanced towards the tower. Shoto's gray and green eyes were alight with cold fury. He was fortunate that Midoriya was in his line of fire as he saw Parker looking down at the melee and the incoming Bakugo. Sorry, Shoto hissed as ice surged all around him, and he could see the fear in Midoriya's eyes mid-charge. Sui's tongue lashed out, wrapping around him. He let loose the torrent, and everything froze. There you are, Bakugo roared as Peter looked up from the center of the king ring. He jumped back, avoiding the exploding berserker's flying kick and landing near the edge of the ring. Dumb move not going for Takoyami, Peter stated, his hands shooting to his pockets as Bakugo landed while grinning darkly at the target of his ire. Who cares if your team gets some points? Bakugo snarled. We all know why I'm here for you, redshirt. He approached, hands outstretched as he took a step closer to the golden ring's center. All alone, you and me. He grinned, aiming his hands at Peter. I will be the one at the top. He stepped forward and blasted off, readying an explosion with one free hand. You got that. Bakugo closed the distance faster than he'd ever flown before. But somehow, Peter bent back like he was in a limbo game, letting Bakugo sail over him. Fine for him. Bakugo just threw his palm in Peter's face, another explosion already erupting. Then Peter twisted, his hand a blur coming out of his pockets. Bakugo heard a click something in the American's hand. Then a white mass of powder covered him as he had his arms out to defend. Bakugo kept going, throwing out a hand to blast Parker. But nothing happened. What the fu-yo-yo-yo-yo-yo? He screamed, the floor under him exploding. Peter blinked, smiling. Looks like it worked. I'm sorry, what was that you were saying? Peter asked to no one in particular. Takoyami finally emerged over the building's ledge, landing on his feet as he handed the silver armband to Dark Shadow. The beast flew in and deposited the band into the bowl. What a turn of events. Bakugo made it to the king's ring of the red team but fell into a trap. Takoyami has deposited a silver flag. That's now 20 love red team. Present Mike yelled, and on the Jumbotron the red team's bar went up by 20 points. Peter smirked as he looked over at Takoyami. Mind getting Bakugo's flag? Can't really move from my circle here. He pointed into the hole below. Momo can use some backup. With pleasure, Takoyami nodded. Dark Shadow, let's go. Aye aye. Wind rushed in Bakugo's ears. Got him, Nit. He let his guard down and let that cocky bastard land a sneak attack on him. Bakugo twisted in midair, tucking into a defensive roll in a sandbox. White filled his vision as he coughed, standing up. It stung like a bitch, but he could still move. Bakugo felt gravity take him before he landed hard on his ass. FANFICTIONnet. Katsuki roared as he got up. He had landed in some white powdery sand in a sandbox for some dumb reason. It was the same stuff that Parker had thrown at him. He looked around, seeing a vacant space before him with only the stairwells and supports surrounding him. No windows or light were pouring in. Standing 20 feet away was Rich Girl, paintball rifle in her arms. That's right, she did that same trick to Icy Hot during the battle trials. Fuck, he should have just stayed airborne. You'll pay for that. Katsuki roared, glaring down the defiant girl as she aimed. He could close the distance but he wasn't exploding. His red eyes widened as he looked down at his hands that were covered in white powder as he aimed behind him again. What the? That smell. Baby powder. He felt a shot from Rich Girl's weapon hit his shoulder and Katsuki yelped in pain, gritting his teeth as he ran for it, trying to get the white substance off of him. He dragged his palm against the wall, jumping behind a pillar for some semblance of cover. There you are. Dark Shadow's voice became deeper and more violent as Takoyami landed in his previous position. This floor was partially cut off from the sunlight outside, and Katsuki felt fear grip his heart. He jumped, avoiding the Shadow Beast's claw strike. The Dark Shadow from before was the size of a large dog. Now it was as big as a horse, one with golden eyes that were even more demonic and features just as frightening. Katsuki raised his hands up in defense, only to get a projectile to his hand, making Katsuki yell in pain as he broke out in a run. He could hear the Shadow Beast give chase as he panted. He had to get this white stuff off of him and get a better angle on these assholes. He kept running behind pillars, sprinting as much as possible while Dark Shadow gave chase and Rich Girl fired when the opportunity presented itself. Katsuki could hear the whizzing of her pellets and he looked down, seeing a welt on his hand under the white powder that stopped him from utilizing his quirk. Katsuki gritted his teeth and kicked himself. Parker had fooled him. He'd lured him into a trap and he fell for it hook, line, and sinker. How could he have been so? The entire building shook as both occupants in the room looked up. What was that? Bird yelled, his larger and more aggressive Dark Shadow growling beside him. The windows off to the side burst as ice spears surged forth, the force of the wind making all three jump away from the sudden danger. The entire side of the building was now covered in ice. It's Todoroki, Rich Girl yelled as Katsuki rolled across the ground, eyeing the stairwell. He scoffed and broke out into a sprint. If he could get there, he'd be able to rub this shit off, get to Parker, get his gold flag, and fly back to Four Eyes. He had to win this. Peter jumped back from the ledge as he looked back at the side of the building. The entire north side of the building was in the process of being consumed by a mountain-sized glacier. The entire arena and especially the audience was slack-jawed at the incredible display of power. There was no commentary even from present Myheroacademia. Holy shit, he uttered as he saw Todoroki appear on top of the glacier. Peter checked his web shooters and leapt back to the center of his ring, carefully avoiding the hole that Bakugo had fallen through. Midoriya and Isui were on that side of their field, with Pony and Sato on the south side. He took a deep breath. He had to stay on the roof that was the extent of the king's ring. If he moved out of bounds by accident, his team lost. If Todoroki pushed him out or took his golden armband, it was fine. But Bakugo was still below him, and them giving up the gold flag was something Peter didn't want to deal with, even if it meant he could join the battle. He needed to attain victory as he heard the crunching and cracking of ice. Todoroki began to slide down, pushing himself forth in a charge. Here was a moment, a tiny, fleeting moment of pride standing atop the mountain of ice. Shoto felt like he could hear a pin drop in the silence of the stadium. The crowd didn't seem to breathe. Even the commentators were speechless. Best of all, his father was surely watching Parker, staring up at him with more surprise than he'd ever shown in front of him. Back in their initial encounter, he doubted that Parker would have thought Shoto capable of this. The full power of his right side, the only side he needed to use to become a hero. All that he needed to do was win this game and then everyone would know it. All that was left was to take his opponent's band and... Holy shit, dude. Do you make snow cones? Shoto's lip twitched, followed by his eye. 5 minutes. That was all he wanted. Couldn't he have 5 minutes of silence against Peter Parker? Did he not know that there wasn't supposed to be this much talking in the middle of a fight? Whatever. He needed to finish this before the other Silver Knights got any ideas and intercepted him. With an annoyed glare, he leapt from the summit of his creation. He slammed his foot down upon landing on the glacier's slope, willing another stream to break off of the glacier and wash over Parker's ring. The wave covered the entire rooftop of the tower, consuming the ring, leaving him nowhere to run. Yet even still, he jumped high and over the wave, coming down alongside his opponent, aiming his webline towards him. Shoto jumped to the side, avoiding Parker's dive kick as it cracked the ice like a hammer. Unfortunately for him, Shoto had made the top of the glacier unstable. A literal ton of ice fell down, crashing into the roof of the ring and breaking it like an egg. And it didn't stop there. The pull launched Parker into the air, and Shoto noticed a line of webbing bring a fresh piece of rubble with him. "Hey man," Parker called from the air. "Chill." Shoto growled at the pun, his attention momentarily stolen away from the rocking coming right towards him. No, not towards him, near him. Shoto jumped forward, creating another stream to sliding down to and rushing forward with renewed vigor, ignoring the cold burning his right side as the ice began to cake his limbs. Parker landed on the wall of his ring, or what was left of it. Shoto launched another stream of ice, but Parker simply jumped to the side. He didn't let up, firing 2 streams at once, one directly at Parker, and the other towards the only known broken part of the rooftop. Only for Parker to pirouette in midair, using one of his previous streams as a foothold to launch himself straight at the enemy Silver Knight. On instinct, Shoto willed a wall of ice to form in defense. His left side screamed from the cold, and the wall of ice in front of him shattered like glass from a mighty punch. Next thing he knew, a twirling Parker's foot cracked against his jaw. The world spun around the Son of Endeavor as the momentum of the hit sent him spinning off balance right off the roof, yelled in pain. He recovered after a debilitating moment, twisting as he conjured more ice to form a slide. He took it, sliding down at an angle as his body got nicked and battered from his own ice. He curved downwards from his massive ice slide and angled down into an alleyway. Shoto yelped upon exiting the ice ramp, rolling across the ground, hands wrapped around his head as he finally came to a stop. What a turn of events. Present Mike yelled. Todoroki summoned a mountain of ice from out of nowhere and fought against Red King Parker. But the first year Phenom showed him who's boss, and he's out of the ring and back on the ground. Shoto panted, resting on his back while taking deep breaths as he looked up. He saw that his glacier mountain dwarfed the tower complex, and yet Parker was still in his ring, or what was left of it, near a shack that was presumably the stairs. And as for Shoto himself, no golden armband to show for it. Biting his lip, he slammed his fist into the ground, letting out a yell as he willed himself up. Again, he couldn't even touch Parker. First in the battle trial, then in the race, and now this. Shoto felt the scab from before break, blood running down his lip. 12 minutes remain in the war, declared midnight over the loudspeaker. Shoto narrowed his eyes and looked around, seeing himself in a warehouse area with plenty of sheds, boulders, and rocks. Sui and Midoriya were in this area just ahead, and he didn't know if they'd been incapacitated by the formation of his glacier. No matter, Shoto saw some side paths that led to the other side of the tower. If he couldn't get the King's Band, he'd settle for the other two Silver Knights, Sato and Tsunotori. They had to be roaming around on the other side of the tower if Midoriya and Asui had been patrolling the south side. He brushed himself off, took a deep breath, and broke out into a run. His eyes looked to the tower and they narrowed. He'd get Parker next time. There's no escape. Dark Shadow roared as he burst through a column, Bakugo avoiding the charge from the Shadow Beast as it grew in size. Tokoyami was doing a good job harassing him. Momo could see the silhouette of ectoplasm in a dark corner of the room, one of his many clones observing the proceedings of this fight to ensure no foul play. The camera on his shoulder helped too. Bakugo was looking frantic, eyes wide with frustration as he kept sprinting, doing his best to avoid Tokoyami's slowly growing shadow monster as well as her paintball pellets. No explosions were coming out of his hands, only mere sparks. The baby powder was holding firm. He seemed to hide behind a column and take a breather whenever he could before Dark Shadow would be on him again. Tokoyami in hot pursuit while she was positioned nicely by the stairwell. There was nowhere for Bakugo to run. Mom took aim, firing a couple more shots that grazed their intended targets. Bakugo's shirt and arms were covered in webbing and welts, plus his pants were covered in filth too, but not enough to immobilize. Time seemed to slow as she took notice of a critical oversight. His hands weren't as caked with baby powder anymore. He was using the pillars to rub it off. Dark Shadow, take his band off his arm, Tokoyami yelled, continuing his pursuit. The monster looked back, its golden eyes searing as it saw the blonde run towards some crates. I'll do what I want. The beast roared before punching his targets would be cover. Bakugo leapt away, rolling to the ground before breaking into a run. There was more white on the floor. Momo aimed in front of Bakugo and held down the rifle's trigger, unloading it at full auto. The blonde dodged as best he could in the darkness to avoid the webbing, yelling as he felt his leg get splattered. His UA gym uniform was nearly covered in white by this point, both from the baby powder and Momo's projectiles. Dark Shadow crashing down made him stumble for a moment. Unfortunately, he remained on his feet. I need a flashlight, Tokoyami yelled. Dark Shadow is more aggressive and powerful when in the darkness, but he's not as obedient. He turned towards Momo, hand out. Momo's hand was already aglow as she lowered her rifle. She saw Bakugo's burning red eyes turn towards her as he aimed his hands. There was still some powder, but not nearly enough to stop his next attack. Go to hell, he roared, his hands lighting up as Momo jumped to the side. The explosion surged out, brightening up the room as fire and fury lashed out. Momo was caught in the shockwave and the black-haired beauty yelped as she rolled on the floor, her ears ringing. That was no normal explosion. It was almost like his gauntlet blast. She got up, seeing Bakugo escape up the stairs while using his hands to turbo boost, roaring in pain. A much smaller Dark Shadow slammed into the stone wall by the stairs, but its hand reached out and grabbed Bakugo's silver armband, tearing it off of his arm. Bakugo didn't care, explosions popping out of his hands as Dark Shadow whined at the light from the explosions, and the blonde bomber continued gunning up the stairs. After him, he's going for Peter-san, Momo yelled as Tokoyami was already running, Dark Shadow pulling him towards the stairs as she got out her walkie-talkie. He was going up to the roof. Peter, she said in English. Bakugo incoming. Thanks Momo. Whoa. Hey, that's mine. Peter yelled over the channel and Momo's heart skipped a beat. What just happened? These boys were just so scary. All this power being thrown around made her glad that no one could see her face. After all, no one could see your panicked expression if there was no expression to be seen. Perfect disguise aside, this was getting a little ridiculous. Toru remembered seeing Todoroki in action before. He was so strong, casually freezing villains at the USJ like a total badass. This was getting ridiculous. There should be a rule against anyone having power like this. At least look before you freeze everything. She was walking out here barefoot after all. Quite the destructive bunch, your classmates. Toru fumed, glancing back at her. Partner, unwanted stealth buddy. She didn't know what to call Monoma other than that he was there. He had approached her as she was getting ready to sneak into enemy territory. His quirk apparently allowed him to copy other quirks. She had half a mind to say that it was normally just Bakugo to his face just a few meters behind her. At least, she hoped that's where his face was. Oh geez, this was what it was like for someone talking to her. She shook her head. Moving on, she and the floating set of pants next to her continued to sneak around the rear of the red team's area. The more people they could avoid the better, especially Shoji. All those ears on them might tip them off. Jiru could also use those earphone jacks of hers, given how she and Kaminari used them before in her exercise. As well as, you know, the floating pair of pants. Well, at least they're using everything they've got, Toru reasoned, but you're going to give us away with those pants. Would you rather I end up stark naked in the middle of the field when I take another quirk? Monoma asked, his tone belying his smirk, and Toru rolled her eyes. I wouldn't hold my breath for the cameras, Toru admitted. She turned around, not wanting to imagine that smug jerk's face as they kept going, even if she could hear him chuckle behind her, a sound that, on reflection, was a million times better than the falling piece of ice coming straight for her. Toru dove forward, dodging the block of ice that was as big as her. Todoroki had sent an entire glacier into this tower. All they could do was barely avoid the spikes and random chunks of ice that came through, and she got a massive chill because of it, both from the ice and the general temperature taking a nosedive. Monoma didn't seem to mind, but she did hear light teeth chattering that wasn't hers. You alright? Monoma called, his voice barely a stage whisper. And fine, Toru said, pulling herself back up. It's getting rather intense up there, Monoma commented. Perfect chance to take the bands, right? If you wanted to get crushed or frozen, but that was the problem with stealth. Always in the firing line, even if some people didn't notice. She glanced around, finding the one door into the red team's base that hopefully had a staircase leading up. Luckily enough, it did. The duo were dead silent as they ascended the stairs, noticing how neither Jiru or Shoji were close by. They must be with their attack squad. What luck! They ramped up the pace, and Toru was glad that Monoma knew when to take things seriously. They climbed up the last 2 floors, arriving to a war zone. Toru had to clamp her hands over her mouth as she saw Bakugo running away from a massive and monstrous dark shadow, and Yaoyorozu was shooting at him with a webbing paintball rifle too. Now, we need to advance, Monoma whispered as he felt her touch her shoulder. No time to waste, let's go, she whispered as they progressed onward, finding an opening as Bakugo was running to the other side of the building, avoiding dark shadow, and Yaoyorozu's aim behind pillars and crates. She heard the roof vibrate above the combatants, debris falling down periodically. Probably Todoroki and Parker. What on earth were those two getting up to? They sprinted up the stairs, thankful for Bakugo's distraction as they got to the top. A few seconds later, she saw it. Parker danced around Todoroki's ice before kicking him off the roof's edge through an ice wall. He leaned over, making a show of looking down at his fallen enemy. On his arm, the golden band seemed to glow in the sunlight as he took a breather. Now it was her chance to shine. She kept her mouth shut, barely trusting herself to breathe as she made her way through the frozen rubble from the Class Ace's most recent fight. Monoma was quiet too, thank goodness. She didn't see him behind her. Maybe he was staying back or taking a different route. Either way, Parker was still focused on Todoroki. She walked slowly and silently over the ice, shivering with each step. She was thankful for the roar of the crowd and the continuing skirmish throughout the battlefield below as the racket covered up the noise of their approach. But God, that ice was cold. Just a little closer and she could pull it off his arm. A walkie-talkie buzzed in his pocket and he picked it up. Peter, came Yaoyorozu's voice through the tiny speakers in English. Bakugo incoming. Toru smiled. Perfect. A big gun to distract Parker while she made her escape. She reached out, the American none the wiser. Thanks, Momo. He replied back in kind. She touched the edge of her target, and Parker's hand latched around her wrist. Whoa, hey, that's mine. He squealed in Japanese. What? How did he notice her? What the heck? Do you have eyes in the back of your head or something? Toru yelped. Oh, what's this? It seems the Red King's ring has been infiltrated by Hagakure Toru of the blue team. We're on class of violence, everybody. That just sounds weird, Aizawa added after President Mike's commentary. What? No. The American trailed off, glancing at the space between his fingers. This is your hand, right? Toru tried not to think of the implications of that question. Yes, it's my hand, like this is. Yeah. She threw a punch, but Peter's head dipped to the side, dodging the invisible attack. He blinked and Toru puffed out her cheeks. Okay, this is unfair. Are you cheating? Nope, Parker said, dodging another punch from the invisible girl. Wait, if you're here without gloves then oh. He bit his lip, blushing and puckering her lips as his eyes looked down and up. Toru swiped at his head with another punch, only for Parker to dodge. Gimme your armband, pervert. Can I take 5 on that? Parker squeaked out, his eyes drifting down to the supposedly empty space in front of him. No, just gimme. Toru fumed as she swiped at him again. She yelped as she felt a push to her back and she collided with Parker. Parker had his hands on her shoulders, but his face looked as red as a tomato. Her bare chest was against his clothed one. I didn't grab anything. Parker squawked out, but his band got ripped off, and a bare hand pulled away as if it had touched him, and he turned his head to see a floating band. Hey, the American said, letting loose a line that stuck on the band. A quick tug and it came right back, with a weight connected to it. Parker grabbed hold of the band, kept his arm out, and something close lined his arm as someone moved fast and shoulder tackled Parker, not making the boy so much as budge. When he heard a grunt, he winced. Then Monoma appeared in front of him, bewildered as his fist is in Parker's arm, and he himself was naked. You okay? But Ho, Monoma asked, staring at his hand as the audience groaned and laughed. Die. Parker jumped towards the invisible girl and Monoma, grabbing them both to avoid a fireball of a blast, letting go of his golden armband in the process. The force of the blast and shockwave pushed the trio on the icy floor, sliding on the ice as Parker hung onto the two as they went over ledge. Toru screamed as she closed her eyes and felt them all weightless, ready to fall. I got you. She felt something latch onto her back and arm, and she dangled from the side of the building, Parker swinging down beside her. Weblines connected them both. Beside her, Monoma also came swinging in the buff, face utterly shallow. You two okay? Parker landed beside her, seeing some dust in her hair. They looked up, seeing Bakugo place Parker's stolen armband between his teeth before blasting away. Why yeah, Toru replied shakily as she nodded. Parker was looking back, but being so close she could see his body tense up. The temperature promptly dropped, and not from the ice mountain nearby. The Red King's band has been taken. The king has entered the fray. Midnight yelled over the loudspeaker. Many in the audience were groaning or laughing. Toru couldn't tell which was more prevalent. Just hang tight. Parker looked back, his face filled with concern as he turned around, and she could hear him exhale in anger. He fired his weblines, pulling himself towards a giant boulder before he took off like a Miss. Toru looked up at the Jumbotron, seeing her invisible form hanging from the weblines, and a naked Monoma with UA's logo over his privates. Too bad the audience couldn't get it out of their minds, or have a censor logo either given their collective groans or laughter. What a sight for our live audience here in the arena. Thankfully for our online and TV listeners, you are given the satisfaction of censorship. But Parker saved two enemies from falling despite ectoplasm standing by. What a guy, I tell ya. Toru looked down, and true to present Mike's word, several clones of ectoplasm were at ground level looking up, ready to catch the naked teens should they fall. How? Monoma muttered, eyes lost. So, his quirk can't be stalled. How? Toru sighed. When she wanted to stand out, she didn't want it to be like this. Bakugo has Parker's band. Yaoyorozu yelled from above them. Someone intercept him. There was a familiar pinging sound right after. Bakugo's band has been turned in. Midnight yelled and Toru looked above. Red team leads 40 love. Oh crud, oh crud. This was worse than getting caught in costume by Ned. All he had to do then was fix up a Death Star, but now he was going to let everyone down. It wasn't so bad, just that everyone was going to hate him for messing up. Hopefully not. Maybe, who knows, but now he was panicking. Don't panic, look on the bright side. He was swinging around and Bakugo was right in front of him. He fired a line right at the blonde bomber, tugging on his back. The blonde bomber came back, but Peter cut his other line as Bakugo twisted in midair and aimed. Peter heard a pop, and an explosion ripped into existence right at him. The shockwave hit him, throwing him to the side and making his line on Bakugo go slack. Peter landed on the side of a building. The blast made his ears ring a little. Blinking away the stars, he saw Bakugo continuing on his path, flying and yelling out muffled roars of pain. Bakugo is going straight for the enemy side. Peter called, grabbing hold of his walkie-talkie mid-swing, pulling himself forward even faster. Anyone have eyes on him? Momo asked. Negative, Takoyami commented. His trail is cold, as bitter as that might be to say. Asui and I see him. Izuku replied over the channel, we'll cut him off till you catch up. I told you to call me Tsu. Midoriya, you're a lifesaver. Peter called back with a grin, I owe you like 10 solids. Attaboy, Midoriya. What's a solid? Not important. Peter quickly said, keep him company and I'll be right off. His sentence trailed off as a shiver ran down his spine. Peter pulled like his life depended on it, leaping off the side of a nearby building, but he hadn't bothered. A few streets over, he could see another ice sheet overtake a warehouse on the north side. That had to be Shoto, but what was he doing all the way over there? Peter took out his walkie. Is everyone Al? Peter's eyes widened. Pony, what's wrong? He asked in English, flipping over one more building, throwing out another line an instant before he hit the ground. Todoroki, came Sato's struggled gasp in Japanese. We're stuck in a few feet of ice, and every time I smash out it just keeps coming. God, here comes more. A grunt was uttered, followed by the sound of shattering ice. Peter stole a glance down the street, Bakugo leaping ever closer to enemy territory. He was at the half line now. At the same time, the frozen street was getting further and further away. Midoriya, you sure you want this? We'll do our best, came Midoriya's voice. You sure, Midoriya-san? Asked Momo. It'll only be for a few moments, Midoriya reasoned, his once shaky voice firming up. I know what's at stake. Get him on the ground and start destroying things. I'll find you from there and back you up. Juzo called out. The American felt at ease as he smiled. All right, good luck, Peter called. Then he fired a new line, and he shot towards the icy street. I got a date with no chill here. He took off, flying towards the north side. His arms burned from the inside, but Katsuki grit his teeth and bore it. One negative about his quirk, for all the versatility and power it could bring him, overuse hurt like a bitch. He remembered one time when he went a little overboard showing some extra on the basketball court. The difference between them and the overuse made his wrists sting for a week. The explosive blast he had conjured up at the rooftop aiming for Parker would have been much stronger and far faster had it not been for the few remnants of baby powder on his palms that he couldn't rub off. He was exerting more effort than normal and he was descending as he crossed the halfway line. Now to just get it to 4 eyes in their bowl, and the blue team would win. The band in his teeth was helping him bite down as hard as possible in an effort to dull the pain of the constant explosions he was using to keep him aloft. That being said, a pair of aching wrists hadn't stopped Katsuki from doing anything he needed to do before, and he sure as hell wasn't going to let it stop him now. He stole a glance behind him, and he couldn't believe his eyes. He actually had to stop and hover for a moment to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Parker, was he just letting him go? After their mid-air tussle, he's just leaving. Katsuki grit his teeth. The nerve. What's this? Parker is averting his chase of his fellow classmate Bakugo and is going off in another direction. Whatever could he be up to? You'll find out with the switching camera feeds. Stop yelling. We are switching feeds now, and Todoroki has the north side of the tower enveloped in a winter apocalypse. Boy, does he have no chill. I don't think that pun even works for Todoroki. So that's how he wanted to play it, huh? Was he not worth the time to take down personally? Was that it? Icy hot was more worthy. Fuck you, he hissed under his breath. Screw him and whatever stupid shit stopped him from taking this seriously. Honestly, that was really starting to piss him off. People just kept talking about Parker when they thought he did something amazing, or that he was the best in Class 1A. Present Mike sucking up to him over and over. Again, it all came back to Parker. That damn clown with so much power, so much ability. He who stopped that villain who was made to kill All Might for a time before getting overwhelmed. That clown who was being increasingly compared to all. Well, you know what? Screw them too. Parker didn't have the spine to stay the course. All Might never ran from anything. Parker was no All Might. Besides, who cared if Icy Hot was messing up the north side of the red team's tower? All Katsuki needed to do was get this band to 4 eyes and he'd win. No matter what crap the American pulled, he wasn't getting through to the next round sitting on his butt while waiting for someone to try taking the band from him. He was level with some of the surrounding buildings and he could see the collection of boulders and vines dead ahead, about 100 yards away. The win was as good as his, but barely a second later, something flew overhead. A patchwork of green laced with lightning sparks. It spun badly on the rooftop that Bakugo was about to land on and rebounded as Katsuki's eyes widened. Smash! Deku yelled, and Katsuki's face knew pain as Deku's fist met his jaw, and the blonde yelled, skidding across the rooftop and through a concrete wall. He yelled as he fell before he regained his composure, firing explosive blasts to slow his descent before landing, ignoring dust and debris falling around him. He'd been hit. Deku had fucking hit his face. His blood boiled, and the sight of 4 eyes base faded as he focused on that fucking snake, looking down at him with lightning arcing over his body. Deku leapt down, lowering himself into an amateur fighting stance. It almost hurt to look at. Even from across the street, Bakugo could see that his stance was too wide. Deku's guard was too open. A swift breeze would knock him flat on his ass, but the lightning around him made him pause. That power-up that he pulled out of his ass at the race, loath as he was to admit it, that little special effects show Deku was putting on wasn't anything to scoff at. Give that armband back, Kaken, Deku declared, staring with hard determination. One shot to his face and now he dared to talk as if he was some equal of Bakugo Katsuki. That's not enough to wipe away a decade of lies, you motherfucker. Die, you bastard. Katsuki roared as best he could with the golden band in his teeth. He fired his aching arms as he charged at Deku, closing the distance in the blink of an eye. Deku looked almost like a blur as he also rushed forward. Katsuki raised his good hand, an explosion popping into existence before he even finished raising it. Fire and sound lashed out, forcing Deku to drop low and slide to the side. But the blast also pushed Katsuki back. Deku realized that the second Katsuki brought his fist down into his guard. He blocked with one arm, while his other hand reached for the armband in his opponent's teeth. Like hell, Katsuki was going to let that happen. "Fuck you," the bomber screamed with clenched teeth, foregoing any further quirk usage as he smashed Deku's fingers between his forearm and head, grabbing as hard as he could, fingernails digging deep and drawing blood. The damn nerd winced in pain, but Bakugo wasn't finished. He grabbed Deku by the collar of his shirt and tossed him with everything he had, pivoting and throwing a little heat into the pitch to get him as far away as he could. Right into the wall back first. Katsuki looked down and tisked. The stupid powder still hadn't worn off completely. Deku would have crashed through the concrete otherwise. Deku was getting up, arms raised and lightning crackling as he charged. "Come on." Bakugo roared in a muffled fashion as he boosted himself with his explosions, his speed surging forth as he and Deku closed fast. Just like before at the battle trial, aimed for his arms. He had this. Fire one mo. The pain in his forearms was too great, making him close his eyes as he fired a concussive blast towards the other knights. He reopened them, only for him to see Deku falling back with his arms raised in a guard position, arms singed with burns. Take that. I win," Katsuki shouted at the top of his lungs, the golden band in his mouth dropping slightly. And then a person rose up from the ground, fist first, and Katsuki's eyes widened, before said fist met his jaw, and the blonde was sent into the air from an uppercut. The bomber saw stars as he was in the air, vision blurry and teeth aching from the strike to his chin. The golden armband floated in the air for a moment, Bakugo's adrenaline high being too much for him to hear Present Mike's commentary. No, had to get it. Bakugo reached his hand out, and a tongue from nowhere grabbed it and curled over it. Katsuki's eyes turned towards the source, seeing the frog take his golden prize, and swallow it before leaping away. Bakugo felt a pit in his stomach form again. "Go Asui, return back to our side," Lipless yelled as he dived back under the ground, as if the ground was made of water. Frog was hopping from lamppost to lamppost before getting to the top of a building. How? No. They had lured him in like this. They'd played him for a fool, luring him into their trap. "I'm going to win, Kaken." Deku's voice came out as Katsuki turned, feeling the adrenaline beginning to fade and the biting pain of his forearms returning. The green-haired snake looked sad. For whatever the fuck reason. "Win? You," Bakugo whispered as he staggered to his feet. The pain in his arms was ignored as he swiped them one last time. All that was left was an insidious rage as his red eyes bored right through Deku. "Don't deserve to win, you snake." He blasted off, charging at Deku. He countered, and jabbed as Katsuki veered to the side with a sudden blast. Hate and anger were good motivators, and Katsuki's focus sharpened, time slowing down. He saw Deku's silver knight armband. Oh, how he wanted to blast the idiot's head off, to kill him for lying to him for all these years, trying to save him despite never being asked for help, treating Bakugo Katsuki like he was some kind of weakling. Not today. Katsuki's hand lashed out like a viper, grabbing the band as Deku's head turned, eyes widening as the blonde tore off of Deku and threw it behind him. He clapped his hands together in a cone, aiming it towards Deku as he tried to pivot and punch. "Stun grenade," Katsuki's yelled, and the ensuing explosion was channeled forth into blinding heated light. He heard Deku yell in shock. "Too bright. Take this." Katsuki used his hands to make him spin around at a high speed, and after a few revolutions, got the stunned green-haired fuck in the head with a spinning kick. He sent his enemy flying into a building and through the nearest window. The pain was becoming unbearable as Katsuki winced. He was looking towards the ground when he saw the solid stone dip down and become soft. His eyes widened as he aimed his hands downward. If he landed in that quicksand, he'd be no better than the blockhead and the others. Lipless had been biding his time. The pain was incredible, like nothing Katsuki had ever experienced before, not even when he trained himself to his limits during his junior high days, the days leading up to the UA entrance exam. During the period after the USJ attack, he saw the Deku's band flutter down towards the quicksand. "All might. Watch me," Bakugo grit out, his foot ready to hit the ground as fingers pierced the quicksand. "Go." Beyond. He opened them, and his red eyes burned with focus and determination. He would win this. Plus, he fired his strongest turbo boost with enough force as a gauntlet-less full blast, sending him flying towards the silver band as he bit down, grabbing it with his teeth. His arms were creaking, but through the tears Katsuki surged forth, zooming down the street like a missile as he left Lipless and Deku behind in the dust, fire, and sulfur. His cheeks flapped in the wind from his flight, arms exploding in agony as he could barely keep his eyes open. Ultra. Katsuki roared with gritted teeth, the band in his mouth as he approached the Blue King's ring. Catholic's vines parting like the Red Sea as he flew right in, rolling in a heap as he finally stopped, panting and on his back. The armband flopped out of his mouth as he saw the others come over to him. Bakugo, you alright? You look like you're covered in webbing, Orange asked as she and Dollface approached. Even Four Eyes loomed over him. He appreciated the shade, but don't look down on me, damn it, Katsuki thought as he panted, not wanting to move his arms with all the aching inside. Take it. He heaved for oxygen, wincing as the adrenaline from his last big burst faded. Orange grabbed the band and took it out of sight. Well done, Bakugo. You got us a band, Four Eyes exclaimed. That was so cool. You came down that street like a missile. Dollface pumped her arms. Blue team is on the board, Midnight exclaimed. They trail the Red Kingdom 4-20. 6 minutes remain in the war. Katsuki rolled his eyes as he closed them. Shut up. He didn't get the gold, he had to settle for silver. The idea burned in his soul, but the pain was like fire pokers goring his very bones as did his best to not yell in agony. If he had just hung on to Parker's band, they would have won. He would have beaten them both, him and Deku, but they had bushwhacked him, and he couldn't do anything at the moment. Bakugo, you alright? Dollface asked. He's clearly in distress, his arms are shaking. Catholic spoke out, walking over despite the giant massive vines behind her head. Katsuki's eyes bore holes in them all. He didn't need their pity, damn it. Just focus on defense and the win. Ignore me. He scoffed, looking down as he seethed, suppressing a yell of agony. Need a minute or two. Incoming, came a voice. It sounded like blackface. We're under attack. Positions everyone. Orange yelled as Katsuki lied on the ground, but he felt a floating sensation as he was lifted in. Dollface was now holding him. Let go of me, I can walk, he barked, Katsuki infuriated at the idea as Dollface bridle carried him. Even Four Eyes coming over to lift him behind a boulder. Those explosions must have put a great deal of strain on your arms. Just hide behind here for now and recover, Four Eyes assured as he and Dollface set him down. Katsuki seethed as his forearms touched the ground. How much longer do you need? The blonde glared at the stern-looking blue-haired elite. Four Eyes wasn't backing down. We can buy you time. Then you can join us in the defense and get back in the field. 2 minutes, Bakugo uttered as he rested against the boulder, panting as he caught his breath and waited for the throbbing in his forearms to subside. We'll give you more. You may not like us, and I don't like you, Dollface reprimanded, the two of them standing tall as they heard yelling. But we're a team, so let's act like one. In 2 minutes, you can blast these guys to Kingdom Come. She tapped on her new metal boots and hopped to the upper edge of the boulders. Katsuki panted and closed his eyes, feeling Four Eyes walk away to hide as he heard the yelling intensify, roaring mixed in. 2 minutes. Then, he could go wild, and find the damn frog and make her vomit up that armband. By any means necessary. There's a large group huddled around the king's ring. How many? That sounded like Shishida-kun. 8 of them. No, 7, no, 9. Can someone please tell me the right number before I walk into an ambush? I don't like the idea of walking into an ambush. Sounded like Kamakiri-kun to Itsuka. Nobody does, but this isn't an exact science. A lot of things are exploding and it's making hearing things rather difficult. From within the Blue King's ring, Itsuka smirked. It was getting hard to hear everything, but Hatsune's tech was working like a charm. Calling it a godsend was an understatement. It was a dream come true. The hidden comm units were working. Though, the implications of what she was hearing didn't exactly paint a nice picture. The red team was clearly ahead in the communications department. As good as she was, even Hatsune couldn't pull a set of mics and receivers out of her arm like Class 1A's rep could. But like her father always said, make do with what you have. And what Itsuka had was a set of fortifications that would make Jericho proud. At least, up till the noise hit. Quickly pushing away the bad thoughts, the Orangette snuck a peek at Shizaki. The girl hadn't moved since she started growing her vines throughout the area, taking advantage of the rocky terrain and tunneling through to get across as much ground as possible. What's the verdict, Kendo-san? Ida asked. They've got a way to figure out how many we have, but I don't recognize the voices outside of Kamakiri-kun and Shishida-kun. The Blue King nodded, racking his brain for an answer as he cupped his chin. I would suspect Jiru-san and Shoji-san. Both of their quirks seemed adept at location and reconnaissance during our initial exercise. Eda mused. I do wonder if Honuki will attack at some point. That won't happen, Shizaki stated, with both Itsuka and Ida looking towards the praying vine-haired girl. My vines are going underground. If Honuki wishes to invade this sacred place, he will have to go through my vines. I do hope he doesn't. The girl muttered in sadness. The pain must be too much for a person to bear. I wouldn't wish anyone to intrude here, for the vines may be too much. She likes to ramble as much you do, Ida-kun. Uraraka teased. Ramble. I don't ramble. Ida squawked in defense, eyes wide. Itsuka giggled. Well, either way, it gives us faces to the voices, so I'm not complaining. How's everyone doing over there, Hatsune-san? A few steps forward, the girl that seemingly had supplied the blue team a chance at defense was staring off into the distance, Uraraka jumping from boulder to boulder, tapping one at the ready. Her quirk combined with Hatsune's hover souls was quite convenient. According to Hatsune, she could see for 2 kilometers, meaning she could scan the battlefield from their highest point near said ring, atop of a giant spire of sorts. That being said, she was going to ask why the girl was drooling whenever she looked off towards the red team's side. Hatsune, the orange-haired girl pressed, causing the girl's head to snap around. What's going on? The girl tilted her head before exploding into a megawatt grin. Oh, you mean the enemy. Itsuka wanted to facepalm. Yes, the enemy, what's happening? Well, Hatsune said, leaning back down and refocusing her goggles on something in the distance. The king is going to an ice building and... Hello, what? Kendo asked. It looks like we've got some company trying to come in from the right. Came Setsuna's mouth to her side. Itsuka turned, seeing Setsuna's floating head that was missing a section of her skull, mainly where her right eye was. She was combing the battlefield and was there eyes and ears in the sky as her body was sitting down close by the recovering Bakugo. Itsuka took a deep breath. This was it. All right everyone, she screamed, get ready, we've got company coming in. This was getting tricky, Kyoka mused as she looked at the 20-yard wall of giant boulders and coiling writhing vines. That Shizaki girl was being put to use, and judging by the placement of those boulders, Uraraka must have moved them around given the craters formed under them. Even worse, Shizaki's constantly moving vines were producing something close to white noise. She couldn't make out how many people there were over there. Well, how many are inside there besides Ida and Shizaki? The mantis boy, Kamakiri asked as Shishida, Sen, and Away stood by. By her side, Ajiro and Shoji loomed. She pulled her earphone jacks out of the ground. Can't tell, but considering we heard from Asui that Bakugo retreated back to the ring with Midoriya's band, and that the boulders here were moved and they don't have a strongman like Shishida or Shoji here. Kyoka stood up, her lobe jacks coiling back to their normal length. We can only assume that Uraraka is inside too, so at the very least, 4. We haven't seen Kendo yet, and knowing our class rep she must be leading the defense. Sen added as he looked towards the giant vine mass. Shizaki, you're something else. He whistled. Any word from Honuki? Oase asked, only to feel a portion of earth beside him turn muddy, and Honuki in question popped his head out. Speak of the devil, Shoji commented. I tried prodding around. Honuki grunted as he got up to his feet as if he was climbing out of a pool, covered in quicksand and mud as he patted himself down. He showed his hands, showing several cuts. Couldn't get underneath. As expected of our class rep. Only Kendo would think of such a counter. Shishida growled out. What do we do then? Ajiro spoke out, earning Kyoka's attention as they looked up at the vine wall. We're all being judged right now. Me, Jiru, Shoji and Awase hung back when you guys met Kirishima's team just in case someone got through on foot. The blonde looked dejected. Then again, Bakugo's approach made sense but Todoroki's. Now's not the time to dwell. Shoji's tentacle hand spoke out. We gotta make an impact in this war. Kyoka narrowed her eyes and looked down at her amp boots. I have an idea, she said, standing forward. Let's try a little siege then. She smirked, her lobes going down and plugging in. A siege? But none of us except you have ranged quirks. Kamakiri yelled. They do. I mean it's only a matter of time before their silver knights come here. I mean, they need to do something too other than hide. The mantis boy suggested and Kyoka perked up. Say, where are the other silver knights? Kyoka asked and she went over them in her head. Bakugo, Todoroki, Kirishima, Shiro, and Shoji. Is there anyone close? Kyoka was cut off when she saw a bright light to the north. It looked like a full discharge, like Kaminari's stupid million volts. Hey look, Shoji said, pointing upwards, and far above the ring was a floating head. That's talkage, Kamakiri hissed, turning towards the area where the light show came from. Suddenly, body parts came flying out, followed by a girl. With a vest, hookshots, and boots. Kyoka perked up. She saw the pink-haired support girl in that mess, but there was Kendo Itsuka. She was flying to the warehouse, being propelled by her hookshot vest and landing on an floating, and the floating mess of body parts were just ahead of her. Kaminari is in battle, Kyoka yelled, going to her walkie-talkie. Honuki, you can get there faster. Same with you, Ajiro. On it. Honuki ran, diving into the ground. Ajiro began to sprint right after him, going in the direction Kendo and Takage were flying towards. Kyoka turned towards the fortress. Kendo is your guy's class rep, right? Kyoka asked, turning towards the Class B boys. Kamakiri nodded, eyes narrowed. What of it? The punk girl smirked. Well, we don't have to deal with their queen. So let's. Kyoka lifted up a foot. Rock this castle's world. And brought it down, her sound waves surging out and meeting the vine defense. Shoji, you can glide and write, she yelled, and the taller monstrous boy nodded. The black-haired girl pointed at a warehouse. Think you can get in and cause some mayhem. On it. He began running, heading towards a fire escape. Kamakiri, Sen. Jiru yelled, turning towards the Class B boys. Hack and slash at the vines, aim for the parts that don't have a boulder underneath. I'm gonna feel guilty attacking Shizaki's hair like this. Sen muttered lightly, but we have to win. Kamakiri growled, nodding towards Kyoka. Alright, leave it to us. Blades came out of his arm as he grinned. Let's trim this garden down to size. He leapt in, arms aflurry as he began to hack and slash at the vines. Sen was beside him, arms twisting like drills as he began to shear away. Those drills of his were coming in handy as they attacked from the right of Jiru's sound wave. She felt the amp blast soften as she readied herself for another shot. She saw the vines coil and move about. They were moving to replace the ones being destroyed by Sen and Kamakiri, which meant, Shishida, awace. Kyoka yelled. But the two were ahead of her, running towards the edge of the boulders as more vines began to retreat. We're on it. Let's go, big guy. Shishida roared at Oase's agreement as they prepared to flank, and Kyoka grinned. She saw Shoji at the edge of the warehouse on top, ready to get a running start. Now this was a siege. I'm coming, Peter yelled as he arrived at the frozen-over warehouse, twisting in midair and delivering a spinning dive kick. He broke through the ice and steel like it was nothing, landing on the frozen ground. He looked up, and his spine tingled as he used his web lines to avoid an ice surge. Sato and Pony were both knee-deep in ice, but Pony's two horns were at work harassing Todoroki, making him dodge and sidestep. He could see some cuts on their opponent's uniform as he sent out another surge towards Peter. Peter jumped from the wall and towards Todoroki. The red white-haired boy growled, conjuring another surge and avoiding Peter's punch. The brown-haired boy's head turned, seeing Todoroki eye to eye before the ice user surged forward towards Pony. You won't get our band so easily, Pony yelled, firing another set of horns from her head, and Peter was able to see blood dripping from her head. That's right, Pony did mention in passing that making too many horns too soon would cause her scalp to bleed. Peter aimed his web lines towards the other wall, right near an ectoplasm clone who sidestepped the web line. He tugged hard, zooming towards Todoroki as he surged towards the immobilized Pony and Sato. As he got closer, he began to take aim with his other hand as he got closer to Todoroki. With one strike he could end this, break the ice around his arm and get his band. Todoroki looked back, eyes widening in fear and desperation as Peter's arm was aiming for his head. Peter's fingers came down on the trigger as time slowed down for the two fighters within the frozen dark warehouse. Peter felt a tingle in his spine. Avoid the front. He began to rear his arm back, and just in time too as Todoroki's left side swiped back at him, and a small gout of flame came forth. Wait, did it come out of his arm? Is that? Sato yelled. Fire. Pony finished. That's Endeavor's power. Peter felt a chill as he saw Todoroki's eyes bulge in rage, looking almost like Bakugo's as he roared. He slammed his hands to the ground, and the entire warehouse shook as ice surged like a flood. Peter felt like he was bare naked in a nor'easter as he was slammed to the wall, unable to avoid the ice attack at point-blank range. Ice caked him all over save for his hands, feet and head as he looked over the fresh icing that the warehouse had gotten. There was white mist everywhere, with a new ectoplasm in the rafters and the one on the ground fading into blue goo. Peter's heart clenched when he saw Sato and Pony now chest-high in ice. They looked pale as sheets, teeth chattering, and a limping Todoroki came through. Horns stuck in his legs as steam was boiling off of him as he melted whatever ice was in his way. The white frost that caked him was turning to steam as well. He was panting too, heaving for oxygen as he took the stunned and freezing Silver Knight's armbands. Peter struggled, feeling the ice crack. Todoroki looked back up and the two looked eye to eye yet again. The rage, but not an all-omnicidal rage like Bakugo's. Rather he seemed frustrated, more angry at himself. Todoroki roared, sounding more like an angry animal than a human, conjuring an ice spire to burst open the warehouse as the frost that used to cake him was beginning to come back. He began to run, conjuring an ice surge to ride on. Peter got an arm out, then another before he punched near his legs and got his limbs out. "Geez, that's cold," he yelled, landing in the ice rink as he sprinted over to Sato and Pony. "Get our bands," Sato yelled, teeth chattering. "D don't mind us. He's getting away, Peter. GG go," Pony added in English, shame written all over her face. Peter glanced back. "Yeah, but," Peter came down with a strong punch, cracking the ice all over. "Should help you out. Once you're out, rest up and join the group attacking Ida's castle." He turned around and began to sprint, firing web lines towards some buildings and flying up. "We will," Pony yelled as Peter swung farther and farther away, a thought racing through his mind. Todoroki could use fire too. Why hadn't he used it this whole time? Peter mused as he fired another line, only for his web line to snap after something hot and sticky splattered on top of it. Peter yelped as he fell to the ground, landing on all fours. He looked up and saw the charging forms of both Ijiro and Tetsu, with Mina from the rear. "We got you now, Ace. No hard feelings," Ijiro declared, arms hardening up as the steel-haired boy became as hard as steel. "Dude, you can turn to metal. I knew a guy that had a metal arm, but that is so awesome," Peter said while dancing through the jabs. "Hey, my quirk's cool too," Ijiro said. "It is but 1 second." Peter jumped back, giving him enough space to grab his walkie. "Guys, Todoroki has Sato and Pony's bands." Peter yelled into his comm before avoiding a punch from Ijiro and then a jab from Tetsu. "We're too far off," Midoriya spoke over the comm unit. "So that's how you guys have been able to move so fast." Tetsu sneered as he swung another blow, only for Peter to dodge that and another punch from Ijiro. "While back home we do like our phones." The American sidestepped a drop kick from Ijiro and had to leap back from a surge of Mina's acid. He fired his web shooters, Kirishima dodging. Tetsu wasn't so lucky, getting a web to the face. Peter ducked a blow from Ijiro and delivered a backhand to the other boy, sending him sprawling back. "Stop jumping around and fight like a man, Ace," Ijiro roared, getting frustrated as Peter saw Mina aiming. "Could I convince you to fight like a spider?" Peter asked, ducking under a blow from Ijiro and pushed him to the ground with a mule kick before he sprinted forth towards Mina. The Pinkette yelped in surprise as she aimed with her hands, but Peter was faster, firing several web shots at her hands and then mouth. Staggering, he pushed her to the ground and fired a web line at her hand again, binding her to the ground. "Sorry for the pushing." Peter shook his head as he threw out another line. "Oh no you don't." Peter looked back, cutting the line on instinct and twisting to dodge a wild haymaker from Ijiro. The American rolled into his fall, popping up in a familiar low pose. Ijiro grit his teeth and stood in a battle stance. "Come on Ace, let's go, right here, right now." "Ijiro, any other time I would love to." Peter trailed off when Ijiro let out a war cry, rushing forward with his entire body taking on the rough texture of his hardening. "But," Peter screams, dodging a punch to his head. "This is a..." He jumped, avoiding a kick and lashing out with a quick hit to Ijiro's shoulder, causing the boy to spin, which he only turned into an excuse to put more momentum into a big hit. "Bad time," Peter screamed, reaching out and catching the boy's fist with one hand. There was a little give, but Peter saw the surprise in Ijiro's eyes. He threw the blow aside and kicked him hard in the chest. The boy was lifted into the air with the hit, and Peter silently apologized for what he was about to do next. He threw out a line of webbing, catching Ijiro's chest. Peter spun him around, cutting the line and throwing him at Tetsu, who had gotten up from the ground only to have a flying hardened Ijiro smash into his head. Dusting his hands off, Peter looked back to the real reason he was down the road in the first place. He saw Todoroki's massive ice surge stop past the half line, and Peter saw he was running. "Honuki, get Todoroki now," Peter yelled in his comm mid-swing. "It's no use. I tried reaching him, but Ijiro said he's underground." Momo replied over his unit. He and Ijiro are going after Kaminari and Shiro. Peter could see the sights of battle down the road where Ida's castle lied. Time to go on the offensive. He saw Todoroki stop as he continued to swing, gaining on the sprinting boy as he turned around, crouching towards the ground. Ice began to emerge from the ground, caking it and making the soil and concrete patches crack. "Run." Peter was wise to veer to the side, firing his web lines and pulling as hard as he could, as another giant glacier surged forth where he just was in the main road, the glacier consuming any buildings or boulders in its way. Peter flew through the air before he landed on a building, rolling in a tumble before landing on his feet. He looked about, ready to zip on through the buildings before he gasped. The cluster of warehouses and buildings were all lined with tape. He saw Shiro down there, grinning and waving as he fired more tape. With all that tape, he couldn't web swing to flank the Blue King's ring. Damn, he was going to get in, tape or no tape. For the first time in a long time, Shoto felt a surge of something other than cold rush through him. He pushed his legs, forcing one in front of the other, sneaking a look at his left side. He'd used it, that fire. The sudden attack made him act on instinct, and it was the wrong side. Twice before he was attacked on his left side, and lost to Parker in one single blow both times. If it had been his right side, Parker would be frozen and out of the picture by now. Damn, 1 minute, and things got so much worse. Shoto could imagine his old man screaming his delight at the sight of the fire. He grit his teeth. He was definitely watching this and laughing. He had to. Shoto can hear the hiss of steam in the back of his mind. The nostalgic aches of those long, painful sparring lessons. He fought back tears, and directing his self-loathing towards finishing his goal. That thought spurred him forward ever faster. Once this was done, he was evening out his sides away from anyone who could see him. All he needed to do was get the bands in the bowl and they would be in the lead. But what on earth was that noise? It only got louder and louder as he got closer to the blue ring, where he remembered the rest of his team had set up their defenses around Ida. Zaru, no doubt, hoping to take down the team by blowing out their eardrums, no doubt. A decent strategy, with the king not being able to leave his circle after all. However, there was no way that any of their members would be able to get into attack. Plus, the vines and boulders Shizaki and Uraraka had utilized should nullify some of the sound. It would drop soon, and when that happened, all they needed to do was wait out the timer. Shoto snuck a peek at the Jumbotron. Barely 6 minutes, painful but doable. Same with his ice, loath as he was to admit it. Activating his left side melted most of the frost from his skin. A minor recharge, but enough for him to do this. He jumped forward, willing a stream of ice to carry him upward, dropping him into a swift slide towards the line. The noise made his ears ring, and behind a layer of boulders, Uraraka had her hands over her ears, desperately trying to shield herself from the noise. With her down, Sen rushed forward towards the line, piercing through the noise with no fear. Shoto commended the man, even though it was foolish to attack this early. Shizaki's vines had an opening for the tailed boy to enter the clearing, and he was only meters away before hitting the king's ring. Neither Kendo or Takage were present. But why? Shoto narrowed his eyes. No matter, time to improvise. The drill boy got a little further, he jumped, launching himself back. An explosion shook the entire area, drowning out the sound and sending smoke and rock flying in all directions. From the smoke, the support girl flew out, grinning like a madwoman and spreading her mechanical arms out and latching onto several boulders. They moved as easily as baseballs, Uraraka's prep work no doubt. From a long shadow, Kiwaro popped up and tripped Shishida to the ground. Ida was busy dodging blade strikes from Kamakiri, kicking away Sen but getting grazed by his drill hands in the process. Shoto sighed, frost emitting from his mouth as he knelt down. Time to put an end to his bedlam in his kingdom. Everyone, jump, Ida yelled, having spotted him and jumped onto a boulder that was within his ring. Uraraka was on top of some boulders, Shizaki joining her by pushing herself up courtesy of her vines. Hatsune was already with the gravity user. He heard Jiru's amp increase, and Shoto winced. Shizaki's vines were lessening the more she lifted herself off the ground. Good, no one on his team would get caught. Everyone on the red attack squad turned their heads back to him, and time was up. Shoto's flash freeze got them by their boots. Now we finish this, Shoto muttered, seeing a shadow loom and Shoji gliding down using his arms. His eyes widened at what he was dealing with. The twin-haired boy pivoted, and thrust his arm out, summoning a miniature glacier that pushed Shoji out of the king's ring. The slope pushing back the other red attackers as they too were trapped within the ice. All except for Jiru, who was outside the ring. A roar and rocks scattered. Bakugo roared out, landing with ice latched to his boots and pants. His red eyes glared towards the ice user. The hell was that for? Icy hot. He barked. Shoto shrugged. Apologies, Shoto meant it. I didn't know you were behind that rock. Bakugo marched up to him, sizing him up and growling as he shook off his hands, pops going off as he got rid of any ice. He was baring his teeth before he closed his mouth, glare still present as he scoffed. Whatever. We need to get more bands, we're trailing it. Already got it handled, Shoto muttered, walking past Bakugo. The bomber perked up, turning his head at the boy as Ida and the others came down from their perches. Shoto had his bands in hand, and deposited them in the bowl without issue. Incredible. In a stunning turn of events, the blue team have surged into the lead with only 4 minutes remaining. Will the red team be able to take this back, or is this it for the second round? We need to get you a mute button. Wow, Todoroki, that was awesome, Uraraka exclaimed, joining her comrade with Hatsune and Kiwaro. We're up 6 to -40, with 4 minutes left. She looked at the struggling and shivering red attackers as they tried to chip away at the ice. Will they be okay? I'll defrost the glacier when the time runs out. Haha, fate rewarded me with the winning team. Now those support companies will pay more attention to me and my babies. Hatsume's arms pumped in victory. Huh, to think we're gonna win after all. Kiwara muttered. That comment earned Bakugo's ire. What, did you think we wouldn't? He barked, but the white-haired dark-skinned boy shrugged. With how everything started. Kinda, doesn't matter. Shoto spoke up, seeing Ida approach. We have the lead with just over 3 minutes remaining. I say we bunker down our defenses and call back Zero and Kaminari. He patted his arm where his frost-covered band was. About that, Todoroki, Ida tapped his shoulder. We saw a light show where Kaminari was stationed. We can only assume that he's either been attacked or been made stupid. It was Takage, floating in, or at least her head was, minus an eye and an ear. Me and Kendo-chan found him on the ground with his thumbs up acting like an idiot. Someone got him. Hold on, then that means. Kiwara paused, eyes widened. Whoever got that idiot's band is returning to the Red Tower. Bakugo sneered, pointing across the field. Hey Patchwork. He glared up at the floating head. Any word from Elbows? I'm going over there now. Kendo-chan is returning to the central boulevard. We need to conduct a full assault on the Red Tower now to prevent whoever has Kaminari's armband from scoring. Takage yelled. I'm going to go find Zero. You guys do your thing and attack the tower. The green-haired head floated off and Shoto felt a pair of eyes on him. They belonged to Bakugo. Was he about to suggest they work together and attack the tower as one? Hey, icy hot. He growled, walking away. You attack the tower and stop the idiot from advancing and turning in those points. I'm gonna go after Deku and Frog and get her band. And if we're lucky, the golden band too, assuming Elbows lost his. Shoto rolled his eyes. Of course. Do you even have a plan of attack? Shoto mused. Yeah. Bakugo growled, arms out. Attack. And he took off, firing off to a building before running across the rooftops. The ice user turned back towards the defenders as Shizaki came down from her vine mound. Keep our king safe. I'll go regroup with Kirishima and the others. Shoto turned and began walking out of the ring. Then, I'll freeze that entire tower top to bottom. You got it. Uraraka waved. Do your best, Todoroki. We are rooting for your success. Ida yelled as Kiwara, Shizaki, and Hatsume stood by. Their king's band wouldn't be taken. But Yaoyorozu, Tokoyami, and whoever else was in the Red Tower were still a possible concern. Shoto began to run, running past the cursing Class B red attackers. He noticed that Jiru was no longer rooted in her spot, her boots still in the ice. No matter, 3 minutes left. Get to the tower and stall them. He'd made a mistake once. He lost too much since coming to this school. It won't happen again. 3 minutes remain in the war. Midnight roared over the loudspeaker, and Shoto took off on his ice. Time to end this. Out of all the ways this could have gone down, this was probably one of the worst. Midoriya and Tokoyami looked confident, but Tsuyu knew that Yaoyorozu had an idea of what they were in for. This was going to turn into a free-for-all before either side could come up with a plan, a small advantage, given that their side didn't need to do much to tie things up while the blue team needed to pull double duty defending against and delaying them. The radio at her side buzzed. Guys, Todoroki and Bakugo are rushing the central boulevard, came Jiru's voice. The red attack group can't move. Todoroki got them in ice. Midoriya paled while Tokoyami's eyes narrowed. Yaoyorozu didn't so much as react as Tsu had her walkie-talkie up. Did they see you? Tsu asked. No. They were in a hurry too. Heard Uraraka yelling about trying to get to the Red Tower. Why they were advancing towards the Red Tower was confusing. They're up by 1 score, so why risk it, with Todoroki with his band still on no less. Sui glanced back, watching as Yaoyorozu paced along the top of the Red Tower, other knights by her side. Herself, Yaoyorozu, Izuku, Tokoyami to name a few. A sizable fighting force, so for a Silver Knight to lead the charge with Bakugo, Uraraka and Kiwara at minimum, it has to be because they noticed that they're down a flag. Yaoyorozu mused as the group stood at the foot of the skyscraper. Either Zero or Kaminari had theirs taken. Jiru, can you get back to our side? Not without having everyone noticing me. Jiru responded via walkie-talkie. I was able to get out by getting rid of my boots, but I'm useless now. Sorry. Her tone somber and bitter. Don't be, just run Overwatch for us. Yaoyorozu assured her friend. So you see Uraraka and Kirorio trailing Todoroki. There was panting on the other end. Yeah, they have to be going to back him up. In an alleyway seeing them on the move. And if you miss Bakugo, get your hearing checked. Jiru responded with a whisper. Asui Tsuyu. A deep and frightening voice cut in. But the students turned and from the shadows of the building stepped forth an ectoplasm clone, or ectoplasm himself. Tsu perked up. We had a call from the rules committee that it is against the rules for a band to be hidden in a person's place that cannot be retrieved from. In this case, eating said band. The green-haired girl blanched. She knew eating the golden band was technically putting it on her person, and by placing it in her stomach she hoped she could simply hold out and not give the blue team an instant win option. But Midnight didn't mention it in the rules prior. Takoyami spoke out, staring at the trenchcoat-wearing teacher. We didn't consider the possibility of someone stowing away a band in a manner that is unfair to the enemy team. We didn't give you a point penalty as we did not state it in the rules ourselves, but I'm going to have to ask you find a way to release your band from your stomach. The teacher's stone-faced grin did not move, lest we remove you from the match and put in a substitute gold and silver bands on one of your teammates if you cannot vomit it out. You wouldn't be disqualified from the sports festival, just excused from this particular event. I understand, Ribbit. Asui glances around, fidgeting at the curious glances she was getting. Just look away for a second, it'll be a moment. A few members of her team blinked in surprise, but obeyed her wishes and turned around just before Tsuyu's throat bulged. She forced her tongue downward, felt around and grabbed the band. She coughed a little as her thick tongue got its prize. Sorry, Tsu said, throwing out her tongue, gold band on it and lathered in bile and saliva as she coughed lightly, the wet item in her hand. So embarrassing. It is all right. This is our first time hosting this event too. We will put that in the rules next time. Heroes and teachers we may be, but even we are not infallible. Ectoplasm stepped back, nodding slightly. Now, carry on. All right, resuming our discussion. Takoyami mused as Dark Shadow picked up the slobbery golden armband, much to the Shadow Construct's disgust. I suppose one of us will have to wear it. I'll do it. Yaoyorozu conjured a rag and took the band from a very eager Dark Shadow. She cleaned it up before taping it around her arm. I still have a few bottles of Parker Sans webbing. If anyone gets close, I'll have the chance to stick them down. Or you'll get taken out, Takoyami mused. They don't have enough time to go back and score if they take your band though. Yaoyorozu gave a sad smile. Well, hopefully that won't happen and you'll have enough time getting back to base while they're attacking me. Beyond that, I'll provide covering fire from the upper floor. For now, we must clear a road for whoever has that flag if Todoroki and the others are coming here to stop them. Who has the band? Parker-san, do you have the band? Midoriya mused as he talked into the walkie-talkie. Wish I did, but Zero blocked me off and he still has his band. Parker yelled, Peter-san, we need you back here. Yaoyorozu barked as she lifted up the baseball launcher she had made over to the open window. Todoroki, Bakugo and others are coming here for a final assault. Someone has one of their flags. That would be me. Cut in a dull voice and everyone perked up. That voice, is that the Midoriya mused with widened eyes. The General Ed kid from the other day. Takoyami added in surprise. Shinso Hitsohi. Tsu asked, you have a flag? Yes, on the north side and damn it. Shinso's voice picked up in pitch as she heard panting. I got spotted by Takage. She's turning around to relay where I am. He has Kaminari's flag. Takoyami glared out to the boulevard. Half of our team is on the other side frozen. Where are you, Shinso? I'll pick you up. It was Tsunotori on the other end of the comm and Tsui felt relief wash over her. About 200 meters from the Red Tower, give or take. If Todoroki and Bakugo get word, I'll help stall them. Parker responded. Pony, help Shinso out. He's our ace in the hole right now in order to tie this up. On it. We'll stall Kaken and Todoroki together, Parker-san. Midoriya stated as he looked at his teammates. Everyone else take a support role. Sui, you go to the north side of the building and be ready to help Tsunotori and Shinso. Yaoyorozu barked, and the Sui was already hoping along, silver and gold band on her arms. Takoyami, with me in the building. Dark Shadow is more effective here. I'll protect you with all I have. Takoyami muttered. Honduki, Sato, Ajiro, status. Yaoyorozu got into position as Asui began to hop up and climb the building and she looked back, giving one big hop to the ceiling of a warehouse. Ribbit. Her wide eyes scanned the battlefield, looking for any sign. Tsunotori, where are you? Flying now. Sime. She spoke fast, reverting to English as Tsuyu saw Pony lift off past some boulders and huts. Tsuyu primed up her legs and got hopping. Oi Kendo. Found it. Setsuna yelled as her head flew down the alleyway as she chased the sprinting Shinso. She smirked as she can feel her other body parts flying across the battlefield over to her. That should be a sign for Kendo to rendezvous on her position. She can hear the purple-haired boy pant as the silver band was flailing in his hand. Her floating eye, which surveyed the battlefield by her position, could see Kendo taking hook-shot jumps closer and closer, having seen the swarm of body parts. You ain't going nowhere, Normie, Setsuna jeered, grinning as she picked up in speed. The green-haired girl saw the General Ed kid turn around, glowering back up at her. "Now, hand me your band, thief. How about no and run your mouth elsewhere?" The dull-looking boy responded as he turned, facing directly at her, and Setsuna grit her teeth. "Oh, he's throwing puns out here now. Oh yeah, well you." Her mind went blank. "Go the other way." Setsuna's head began to fly off, going the other way, away from the fuzzy-looking kid, faded further from her peripheral as she floated aimlessly down the way she came, her body parts following suit. Itsuka ran across a warehouse in her big hover boots, taking big long strides as she panted. Doing those hook shots by arm and not by vest was tiring on her arms, and she was amongst the best in her class when it came to strength. Hatsum was insistent she keep her vest in case of emergency. However, the Orangette was following the swarm of body parts from Takage until she saw them. About face. "So our thief is going the other way, huh?" Right then, Itsuka made a giant leap, going from a warehouse rooftop to a small plateau, and sprinted after the body part swarm. Although, why were they moving slower than usual? This was it. Down to the wire, everyone on the edge of their seats, ready to see him take the crown. All Hanta needed to do was swing in, take the king's band, and it would be him that won the match for their team. Not Bakugo or Todoroki, him, the little guy that everyone forgot about till this moment. Jumping towards the buildings, he shot out a line of tape, reeling the line back in, shooting forwards like a certain other member of his class, which was totally his idea. He'd been doing this for years. Totally original. The other guy just got an animal motif to go along with it. Another thing that was completely unfair, but that was all going to change. People might not think too much of him, but he knew an easy win when he saw one. Bakugo and Todoroki, for all their power, were the biggest targets in the entire game. Big bang every time you moved. Giant ice river. Real subtle, guys. If you wanted to make a difference in the speed game, you needed to have the mobility and the technique to get around without getting noticed like Zero Hanta. Heck, he even managed to block out the entire flank of the blue enclosure thanks to his tape. No way Parker could get through to get Ida, or anyone without him knowing. A perfect spider web to block a dude whose quirk is named Spider. Genius. It even deterred Parker of all people. Come on, face Zero Hanta mano. Sure, he wasn't as strong, but with his quirk and the environment he had prepared, he could take down even. Wait, was Parker leaving? Hanta stumbled to a stop, barely edging out as Peter came swinging in on his web shooters away from his morass of taped-up boulders and huts. He had to be heading towards his home base. Hanta narrowed his eyes, squinting as he saw Parker yell into his hand. No, something in his hand. Was that a walkie-talkie? Something was up. Wait, did Todoroki or Kaminari get their band taken, and was Parker going back to help? To be fair, objectively speaking, Zero knew he didn't have a chance against the ace of Class 1A. Zero remembered what Parker did during his fight against Todoroki, smashing the ice apart like it was nothing. His tape wasn't going to do anything to a guy like that, right? But if Hanta took out Parker, was that the same as getting the gold armband? Right, he was the big gun of the other team, so he had to be the red team's best chance. Todoroki and Bakugo rolled over everyone else, and Hanta took down the guy that could stop them. With so many scouts watching him, even deterring who present Mike is calling the next All Might will get him plenty of offers. Maybe some from some hot heroines too. Yeah, this was it. Look out, world. Zero Hanta is coming in hot. Hanta hyped himself up as he got to a running start. Where you think you're going, Parker? He screamed, lashing out with a line of tape the moment Parker extended his arm. The white tape hit the stream of webbing mid-flight, but Parker had eyes in the back of his head because he dropped the line before it even hit. Hanta frowned, twisting and sending out another line with his other elbow, willing the line to reel in, to help him catch up to the American. They swung from building to building, Parker swinging up in the air, while Hanta propelled himself at a slightly lower altitude. Hey Zero, I'm trying to get to Midtown. No any shortcuts. How about you stop swinging and just sit the last minute out? Hanta offered, his smile growing larger as he aimed again. Even though he missed, he got to a boulder and pulled. All that training in the battle center every day after school was paying off. He could do this all day. I'll pass, thanks, Parker said as he fired a web line towards the central spire where Cementos sat overseeing the war, and with a single pull, shot off like a rocket, going past it. Hanta gawked. Parker was nearly 3 buildings away from him. Was he just coasting with him and having a chat when he could have done that from the first jump? Oh no you don't. Webbing had nothing on his tape and Hanta was going to prove it. He thrust his elbows forward and willed forth more tape than he ever thought he would need. He sped towards Parker as he was talking again in his walkie-talkie and Hanta grinned. He fired a stream and it wrapped around Parker's leg. Hanta reeled it in as quick as he could. Gotcha. Parker suddenly pulled on his webbing a little too hard, causing him to be stuck between Zero's tape and his own line. All that showing off at the start of the festival, and he was stuck in the middle of the air as Zero fired another stream as it snaked around Parker and tightened up. Yes, he'd got him. All part of the plan. Dude, what is this made out of? Parker asked, gawking at the tape around his leg as he landed upright on the building somehow, and Hanta landed only meters away. I don't know, man, it's tape. I don't question it, but it comes out of your elbow, dude. You can't tell me that's not weird. The American argued. I've been meaning to ask you about it since the practical, but man, you got elbow tape. Of course that deserves questions. Questions? How does that deserve questions? That's his quirk. I don't know. Hanta gawked as a white blob impacted his face, followed by a barrage of other white wet web bullets as Parker fired multiple shots at his arm and leg, each strike causing him to stagger backward and get stuck even further. He fired out his tape, but Parker was faster as he skipped to the side and burst out his tape hold. How strong was he? Oh, geez, it's like ripping your hair off. Is this what waxing is like? Why do people want to do this? Parker winced, patting his reddened arms as he ran over to the immobilized Hanta with web to his arms and legs keeping him rooted to the floor of the rooftop. He got Zero's band and tugged at it. Oh, Hanta roared from under the web, as the band couldn't be taken off thanks to his tape inside it. Parker winced and blanched as he stepped back in mild horror. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. He spoke in English before he returned to Japanese, hand reaching out to grab the flag for good. The black-haired boy's eyes widened. But I need to get it so. Not so fast, came a cackling voice, and Parker dodged as a massive net came down where he stood, and got Hanta in the process. What the hell? Hanta mentally and Parker physically said at the same time, turning to see Hanta being dragged off in a net. He yelled as he skidded across the rooftop, and Hatsume reeled him in with her harpoon launcher. How about that? A pivotal save utilizing my newest baby conceived just last night. My harpoon net launcher, Hatsume yelled, the girl laughing as she fled off with her hover boots, firing her vest jacket and cackling as her large rocket launcher tube she carried dragged poor Hanta like a sack of potatoes. See ya, Parker. What about me? I'm still in here, you mad woman. Hanta yelled through his muffled mouth. He looked back, seeing Parker ready to give chase. 1 minute remaining in the war. Midnight roared over the loudspeaker. Parker turned around, looked back at the red tower, and he saw another miniature glacier rise up, smashing into it like the one Todoroki used around the beginning of the war. They landed in the road and Hanta groaned as he skidded across the icy road inside the net, hands around his head as best as he could as the poor boy went over some potholes and bumps. Ouch. Oof. God, that was gonna leave a bruise. He's sorry about that. It's good for capturing villains, not so much for saving heroes or civilians. I'll make a note on that for improvements. Hatsume looked back and laughed, seeing Hanta glare up at her, and the black-haired boy rolled his eyes. Bruised, skidding along the road, with web in his mouth and arms and yuck, that's gross. Why did he stick his tongue out like that? Two things of note were running through Izuku's head. Well, more than two things, but they were the most important. Firstly, the more he used his new abilities, his skin tingled from the aftershock of the power being coursed through him, the fully cooked nature of his metaphor coming far too literally for his comfort. Secondly, that this amount of frozen ground should be illegal in a competition, which is why Izuku and others avoided Todoroki's opening assault, a much smaller glacier than the ice mountain that was to the Red Tower's south side. Takoyami's part of the floor was destroyed as he fell down, but dark shadow cushioned his fall, much to the shadow construct's discomfort. He and Takoyami dodged it and leapt out of the windows to the side and ran towards Todoroki. Now it was 2-on-1. His arms still had the band covered in frost. Not so much actually was it thawing. Todoroki had a hand swipe over it, and more frozen chunks rose to take its place as Izuku charged, glowing green. Todoroki noticed, gritting his teeth as he was ready to conjure more ice. Deku. Izuku looked up, seeing Kaken leaping and veering towards him. Get lost. Izuku avoided his swipe and explosion, skipping to the side and raised his arms in a fighting position. Kaken sneered before looking back at Todoroki, who summoned a wall to defend against dark shadow. Icy hot. Freeze the entire tower. What are you doing firing that small thing off? He roared, and Izuku noticed that Todoroki was caked with more frost than usual. He was panting too, giving Kaken a harsh sideways glare. Was he getting tired? Firing off all that ice had to be taking its toll on him. Now's my chance. Izuku leapt forward, arm reared back towards his childhood friend. Kaken was smarter, dodging his punch and pivoting to the side. I'm not falling for your shit again, Deku. He sneered and lashed out with his arm, and Izuku did his best to avoid an explosion by raising his arms, but got a good hard blast with fire as he was sent flying. Jinan ate shit, he hissed in discomfort, but I got bigger fish to fry. Izuku rolled on the ground, hearing Kaken lift off before he yelled, and Izuku heard the sound of splattering as he opened his eyes. Kaken was now against the wall, a barrage of web pellets the size of baseballs hitting him as he roared in pain at the salvo, but none had managed to stick him to said wall. Izuku suddenly noticed a shadow overtake him. He looked up and gasped, dodging to the side as rocks and trash cans came down, the rocks being the size of golf balls. He rolled, seeing Uraraka standing on a plateau ledge with her hands touching. He was bathed in the shadow of the plateau. Sorry Deku, I need to win this now, Uraraka shouted, and Izuku looked, wondering why the heck she was calling for help, only for a kick to come out of the wall's shade. Izuku yelped as he took the kick to the chin, rolling across the ground while seeing stars. Get in there. Izuku heard Uraraka take cover as web pellets impacted nearby. He rubbed his jaw, seeing the pitch-black member of 1B rush inside. Takoyami, he yelled, head on a swivel as he spotted his bird comrade yell, and the crunching of ice. Izuku's heart dropped when he saw that Takoyami was caught in a small glacier, half of his body submerged as a panting and kneeling Todoroki held his arms out. Damn it, they're defenseless, Takoyami uttered. Midoriya, stop him now, he roared, shivering as Izuku conjured up one for all. I got Shinso, taking him for a lift. Pony yelled over the walkie-talkie. I see you. Give him here. Sue added. Ribbit. Hot him, she yelled, her tongue making her slur her words. Kaken is in the building. He'll go right for Shinso or Asui if they see him. He needs to stop him now. Those voices. So that's how you've been moving about so effectively. And Kaminari's flag. Todoroki hissed, glaring as he spotted Izuku's communicator, and the green-haired boy's blood went cold. He turned towards the tower, the temperature dropping as he panted, almost dangerously as ice began to spread. 45 seconds. Izuku launched himself forward. I won't let you. He was on his opponent in the blink of an eye. Todoroki dodged his initial kick, his ice surge interrupted. The boy was covered in frost as he lashed his hand out, Izuku feeling the chill. The green-haired boy dodged to the side, avoiding a much smaller and slower surge of ice pillars as Izuku heard explosions of bright light came from above and disorienting shake from a flashbang. Grrrh. His childhood friend roared in anger and pain. Was he hurt from his own quirk? You're dead, rich bitch. Kaken roared at the top of his lungs, before fire made the windows shatter from the sound, and Izuku felt his heart drop. He grit his teeth and jumped for all he was worth towards the heaving powerhouse. He landed in front of Todoroki, throwing a punch that just missed its target's head. But the successor wasn't finished. Izuku followed up with a spinning backhand, getting Todoroki in the arm as he lifted them to defend himself. His fist struck, and Todoroki was lifted off his feet and rolled to the ground. Izuku focused again, green lightning erupting from him as he charged with a reared back fist. Take this, this should do it. A 5% one for all punch in Todoroki Shoto is out like a light. Todoroki was pinned, but as he lifted his head, his eyes widened in fear and desperation. Izuku felt the temperature heat up. He grazed Todoroki's right arm, but a gout of flame erupted forth, singing the green-haired boy's forearm. Gah! Izuku yelped, seething from the burn as he recoiled in pain. Todoroki pushed Izuku, trying to take advantage of his distraction. Izuku tried to step back, find some purchase and steady himself, but Todoroki wasn't giving him an inch. Desperation caused Izuku to grit his teeth and slamming his foot back and stopping himself right before a pillar of ice was about to slam against his head. Izuku had to lean back as far as he could, off-balancing him, and giving him a clear view of Todoroki's chilling right side. Izuku's eyes widened, and a single thought rushed through him as Todoroki was upon him, eyes full of desperation, hate and fury. Sorry Midoriya, you lost, I win. And the ice surged, only for Izuku to be tackled out of the way and he rolled, feeling muscle all over his back as the green-haired boy looked up. You alright? Sato Rakido asked as they got up and turned, facing the ice user as Izuku regained his composure, shaking the cobwebs. Time for payback, Todoroki, the muscular boy yelled. The twin-haired boy hissed, baring his teeth as steam came off of him. Like bugs from the woodwork, he muttered. Sato-san, thank you. The muscular boy put up his dukes and grinned as he reached into his pocket for a sugar cube, chomping on it, his muscles bulging. Hell yeah, now let's get him. Sato charged, Izuku turned back, green lightning emitting out of him as he charged side by side with the larger boy. "You're all annoying," Todoroki roared as ice surged out, forcing Izuku to dodge. Sato meanwhile, with his enhanced power-up from Sugar Rush, gave a roar and a punch, destroying the ice spires, much to Todoroki's shock and fear. "You ain't catching me twice." "Oh," Sato bellowed as he charged, Izuku rushing from the side as Todoroki stepped back, eyes wide as the two powerhouses sped towards him. Sato gave a mighty swing of his fist, Todoroki ducking the blow before Izuku was on him, and the fear was evident in his eyes as he covered his band-wearing side with ice, and got a kick to the arm, making the ice shatter as he yelled in pain, rolling across the concrete. He was on his back, Sato leaping up into the air. Todoroki rolled out of the way, avoiding the Sugar Rush boy's ground pound as he got up, and got a fist to the face from Izuku, and Izuku yelled as he followed through, sending Todoroki flying and back on the ground. The son of Endeavor yelled, coughing spit as he rolled across the ground before recovering. He then roared at the top of his lungs, slamming his hands into the ground as ice spires surged out and Izuku gave a spinning backhand while Sato punched a spire, the ice shattering under their fists. The rage and frustration was all over Todoroki's face, teeth bared, eyes wide and blood dripping down his crown. Sato and Izuku charged again. "We can win this." Izuku eyed Todoroki's ice-covered band as he zeroed in on that. "Just fall already," Todoroki yelled, frustration taking over, and a thick layer of frost surged from the floor, caking the concrete and dirt as Izuku and Sato lost their footing and slipped, sliding as if on an ice rink. Their forward momentum made them slam into a boulder and a dumpster respectively. "Now then." His voice was bestial, guttural and low as he staggered to his feet, facing the tower. "With only my left side. This ends no ga." He was interrupted with a sudden grunt and yell, and Izuku lifted his head as he shook the cobwebs out. And there was Todoroki, sliding on the ice and slamming into a wall, hard before he slumped, writhing and coughing in pain. In his former spot, Ajiro Mashirao's tail was whipping back and forth as the blonde hard martial artist was in a pose. "Shouldn't monologue when dealing a finishing blow," Ajiro mused, standing up, proud and tall. "Least you leave yourself open. Kiwaro and Uraraka are inside." Momo yelled in her walkie-talkie. "Get to the bowl now." 4th floor. She opened her paintball rifle's cartridge and poured more web balls into it as she panted lightly. She was feeling faint. Just had to hold out. She had to take cover from a stunned and berserker enraged Bakugo's massive explosion. They weren't as big as his gauntlet blast, but they still packed a punch. She turned around, seeing Bakugo on his knees, panting hard and gasping in pain as his arms spasmed. Momo aimed. Then Bakugo exploded, surging forward with turbo speed, and Momo gasped before she could fire. Bakugo's eyes were disoriented, bloodshot, and tears were surging forth, but the bared teeth and determined roar he was giving off was like that of a cornered animal, thriving on instinct alone. The berserker avoided her first shot, even as he was covered in web and welts, and twisted in midair as he torqued his body and gave a kick to Momo's arm, knocking away her rifle. The black-haired beauty yelped. His boots were steel-tipped. "You're mine. Yeah, yo," he yelled, and Momo stepped back as she saw his hand spark up. "No you." Bakugo's eyes widened before a foot to the face smashed against his cheek. In came Peterparker with a high jump kick, knocking Bakugo off his feet and rolling to the floor as the blonde yelled in pain, skidding across the ground and smacking into the wall. "Momo, baby powder, Uraraka's behind you," he yelled in English, aiming his web shooters as Momo ducked. She heard a yelp, assuming Uraraka got hit with webbing, getting her feet as Momo conjured up 2 bottles of baby powder from her arms, panting. Bakugo recovered, but Momo was behind Peter's back as she threw the open bottle of baby powder at him. He dodged, jumping and surging towards her and Peter, only to get the second unopened bottle to the head, white baby powder mixed with soap, caking his face and getting in his eyes. "Gah," he yelled. "Damn it, Peter." Momo spoke in English as she pivoted, Peter doing the same, as she saw Uraraka running towards the stairs barefoot in the darkened room, her hover boots latched to the ground by Peter's web shots. She readied her hand, calling something before a dark arm appeared from the wall beside her. Hirorio's fist cracks against her chin, and Momo saw stars. She was vaguely aware of Peter jumping over her and calling her name, rushing forward and kicking something but missing when she heard the American nervously laugh. "Oh, that's cool, kinda cheating though," Peter said, his eyes darting around even as his hands went to the walkie-talkie Asui. "Pony, you might be getting some shadow dude calm." Another black fist rushed out, and Peter's head moved an instant before he met the same fate. Never mind, he's here. Momo shook herself back up, years of recycling information rushing back only to make a messily pole to defend herself with. She charged, sprinting after the brunette in a war cry. She swung wildly at her approaching classmate, a blow that Uraraka tried to touch, but Momo pulled it back for fear of it becoming weightless. I can't lose here, not with my family on the line. Uraraka clasped her hands together and avoided Momo's pipe swing as she jumped over the black-haired girl, making herself weightless and acquiring better jumping power and out of Momo's reach. Momo felt her heart stop. She was going to get up the stairs, only for Uraraka to get pelted by web bullets, going into the wall before several more got her hands and legs. Gah, dang it, this is so sticky, Uraraka whined. Then Momo heard cursing as she saw Bakugo get pinned by pinpoint web shots due to being temporarily blinded. A panting Peter tagged his mouth with another projectile inside. There, no more potty mouth from you, he said as Bakugo raged and thrashed, explosions in his hands destroying the webbing and tearing off the web on his mouth. He reached down, only for Peter to shoot him up once again, his arms and legs pinned to the floor. Momo could see Bakugo's forearms twitching violently as he yelled and roared in anger and pain, red eyes alight with tears and murderous fury at the two. Heaves of oxygen came out of his mouth as he panted at them. I'll fucking kill you. He got another web bolt to the mouth. More angry mumbles came out as Peter kept pelting him with web bullets. Language Katsuki, Peter admonished. Chill. That comment got an even bigger enraged reaction. Momo could just barely make out Mother and Bakugo's muffled diatribe. 10, 9, 8, came Midnight's voice. That's right, Kiwaro's not here. That means, Asui, Shinso. Momo remembered. What's your? She paused, hearing a familiar scoring ping. She turned towards the stairs, hearing footsteps as the struggling Bakugo and Uraraka looked up, their faces alight from the cracks in the wall. From the stairs, Pony Tsunotori was smiling as she looked up, and Asui Tsuyu hopped beside her, Kirorio Shihai dejected and struggling as he was wrapped around her tongue. Shinso Hitsohi appeared, a great smirk on his visage with his hands in his pockets. Already handled. Shinso turned towards Peter as he came up to the busty black-haired beauty's side. Thank you for placing your trust in me, Peter Parker. You're welcome, Peter said simply, as if stating the weather smiled while looking at Momo. He could see the stunned faces of Bakugo and Uraraka around him. You're that kid from Gen Ed. The brunette finished with widened eyes. Bakugo roared in his mouth webbing, tears going down his cheeks as his arms still shook, his body wrapped up in webbing as he writhed like a freshly made cocoon, eyes wide as plate. Yet he was still enraged, saying something at the purple-haired boy who smirked his way. Kirorio didn't see to respond, eyes looking blank. Hello yourself. Shinso smirked down as he gazed at the astonished blue teamers, and the closing siren rang out. And hello world. The score is tied, Midnight yelled. That concludes the War of the Flags, with a score of 6-60. The audience outside the tower roared and Momo let out a sigh of relief, resting against the wall. What a photo finish from our ectoplasm cams. Shinso of General Ed came through with the clutch tying score with assists from Tsunotori and Asui from the hero course. What a great performance from all contestants involved. Present Mike roared over the crowd. You can bet once we have this all on our DVDs you'll be able to catch all the action from the various cameras we had from our ectoplasm clones and our many camera robots. Can you quiet down? We'll go over post-game coverage in the aftermath of the tiebreaker match. For now, let's regroup, clean up, and get ready for the sudden death tiebreaker match. You don't want to miss this, folks. It was over. They'd gotten away with the tie. Shinso, the general education student, walked out to the window and looked out to the stadium seats, humming at the cheers being sent his way. Shrugging his shoulders, he looked back at his team's astonished faces. Casually bringing out his walkie-talkie, he tossed it to Momo, who barely managed to catch it. Thanks for this, would have been in deep trouble had it not been for this. Shinso nodded lightly before turning to the hero course students. The ectoplasm clones began to help up the blue teamers with medical bots on stretchers. Some of them even had first aid kits. We would have lost without Momo-san. Hey man, you do you. Peter said, you're the one that got us out of this. Shinso's eyebrow rose a few notches. Yeah, your point. I still find it confusing though, Parker. I mean, you got us the win. What's got you confused anyway? Peter asked with a tilt of his head. I said I was going to do my own thing and get the flag, yet I only cooperated with you all when I was being chased by Takage and needed help scaling the tower. He turned towards Pony and Asui. Thanks for the lift by the way. Wouldn't have gotten up that fast. Hey, you were one who got us points. No biggie. Pony beamed, smiling proudly. Isui nodded with a ribbit. Yet still, you placed your trust in me, without knowing my quirk. Shinso's eyebrow tilted. Or the scope of my abilities. I'm a general education student, not a member of the hero course. He stared down Peter. You gambled on me, not even sending back up my way until the moment I called. Why is that? Momo turned towards her fellow class rep, and she agreed with Shinso. Peter did just let Shinso do his own thing. He didn't even inquire of his abilities or what he could do. Granted, he had some kind of power that let him finish in the top 32 of the obstacle race, but Shinso Hitsuhi was an enigma. For Peter to just trust him on a whim. Well, it's because you're a teammate. I trusted you, Peter stated, giving a smile as he walked up to the now stunned boy. Plus you had this confidence about you and this drive to succeed. Like, you were in it to win badly. Like, I'm sure everyone here does but. Shinso blinked at him, still silent as Peter realized he was fumbling over his own words. I trusted my gut. You trusted your gut. Shinso reiterated. On me, he said with widened eyes, one of them quirked up in disbelief. Yes, so, I let you be you. And in case you needed help. He lifted up his walkie-talkie. You know who to call, which you did, and thanks to that. I mean, you made into the war in the first place. You got some super cool power to use. And besides, the American beamed, clapping his hands. We tied. He was silent, with Momo quirking an eyebrow. Okay, that sounded a bit lame. But still, you did something cool to let you get Kaminari's flag. You got us the win, Shinso. With us to help. Pony smirked. I told Isui about Kyowaro's ability when we came in. And Isui's tongue did the rest in grabbing Kyowaro's arm, reaching for Mr. Clutch here. She patted Shinso on the back, and the purple-haired boy looked away, cheeks pink. How is a tongue that fast? Kyoryo uttered in disbelief, looking at Isui. Huz hma frog. Ribbit. Isui replied matter of fact. Thanks a ton, Shinso-chan. The boy looked as unsure under all of this praise, and Peter suddenly felt a bit nostalgic looking at him. As if looking at a reflection of himself. Shinso was silent, but he was blushing lightly. Well, I appreciate you all had faith in me. I intended to reward that faith in kind, and I did. Still, this doesn't change anything though. He focused his stare back at Peter and Momo as he walked up to them, hands still in pockets. We're all being judged here, and your fight, Peter Parker, is gonna begin real soon. His eyes were on Peter, who nodded. I'll take care of it. Thanks for being my Miami Ray Allen buddy. Peter patted his shoulder, and the purple-haired boy almost flinched. Ray Allen, Clutch, PCH, you hero course kids. He muttered in confusion as Peter turned towards Momo. You really just trusted him on a whim? She asked, arms crossed over her chest. Peter shrugged. Well, yeah. It turned out for the best, right? Maybe we should have asked about all of our teammates' quirks back during our prep. Isui suggested with a finger to her chin. Well, we got the tie. Pony looked back, seeing Uraraka and Kyoryo up to their feet and being escorted down the stairs with their shoulders slumped. Bakugo was nowhere to be seen. Then again, the blonde probably was raging in a stretcher, given how the medical bots had won close to him. And his arms were shaking badly. Hopefully he didn't hurt himself too much. So, everyone okay? Peter asked as ectoplasm walked up to them. If you would all be so kind as to gather in the tunnel to let the arena change. Parker, he focused his gaze on the American. Your tiebreaker bout with Ida will begin soon. Prepare yourself. Peter closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Okay, he turned towards his comrades, grinning. Well team, we survived. I'll make sure we advance. Great job. We wouldn't have done it without any one of you. Pony giggled, grinning. Isui nodded enthusiastically. Shinso was facing away from the group, looking out to the crowd. But the Jumbotron showed him off a small smile as the crowd gave a respectful swell. Momo smiled back at her fellow deputy as they began to walk out of the ruined ice glaciered smothered building. We couldn't have done it without you either, Peter-san. Momo murmured softly under her breath. Pony's eyes shifted on her, but the Texan said nothing. Quite curious, a redundant choice of words when describing the UA Sports Festival, Kamihara Shinya, the ninja hero edge shot, admitted, but they were the words that best described this event nonetheless. Throughout his years as a pro hero, he never once found himself working the security of the festival. He'd never had that honor. He always found himself working a job tailored to his skill, tracking a target or defending a part of his home district over doing something as menial as security. However, Edshot had made a habit of watching the UA Sports Festival whenever it was on. Watching the next generation of heroes was his duty as a top 10 national ranked hero. Unwritten as it might be, the pressure of watching for the next great hero to fill the ranks of the top 10 was especially severe. Those apprenticed to the top 10 were the targets of everyone from villains to their peers. The pressure of an already heavy load would increase exponentially if the 10 chose poorly. So, even as Edshot made his rounds, he always had an eye on the screen. For now though, he found himself sitting alone in the break room. With the scheduled break, most of the other heroes were on patrol, he being one of the few lucky ones allowed to view the recaps of the festival. An interesting bunch, even though UA kids always were, but this year especially. Talent was all but dripping off most of them. Impressive use of their quirks, tactical thinking, and even battlefield awareness. Most kept a cool head and made the most of the situations they found themselves in. Others utilized defense mechanisms. One in particular, the American foreign transfer student boy, Peter Parker, according to the rolling bottom scroll. Every second that he was on screen he was cracking jokes and jumping around during the new War of the Flags event. Currently, the monitor showed him facing off against 3 of his peers, 2 of which obviously excelled in close combat due to their hardening quirks, and another provided support with acid if the melting concrete was any indication. Yet the boy handled all 3 of them with precision and excellence. The boy clearly paid more attention to his surroundings than his joking nature would have you believe. His movements were almost simultaneous with the motions of his attacker without seemingly any input from him. Curious, the monitor said that he was a heteromorphic type possessing the abilities of a spider. Edshot didn't know any spider that could instantly react to attacks from its blind spots, but perhaps it was simple talent. It would take him far if he could get his priorities under control. Maybe it was the nature of the exercise, but he let the boy Bakugo away far too easily. Yes, he was relying on his teammates to take him out for him, but from what Edshot had seen, he was the fastest of his team, and his maneuverability spoke for itself. Had he engaged Bakugo and taken back his armband, they wouldn't have needed to risk such an act and leave it to chance. Granted, he seemed to have deferred to his teammates, but that sort of margin of error is not something pro heroes in the field will tolerate. It may have helped in the long run of this game, but the fact of the matter was that they were seconds away from losing the match entirely. And in the real world, such a mistake would inevitably cost more than a simple loss in a school game. Nevertheless, Parker had abilities that was perfect for his agency. Shinya got his phone, sending an email to his recruiting agents to get confirmation from UA, in order to send a formal email for an internship. Plus, it helped having what social media and the Pro Heroes message board was calling possibly the next great talent to come from UA. That was getting comparisons to All Might. Having such a young prodigy will bolster the credibility of his firm and will bring the community that Shinya serves at ease. Who wouldn't want to be immortalized as the mentor of this generational prodigy? Behind him, the door creaked, and Edshot caught the hulking form of the number 10 hero as he finished sending his email. "Ah, gang Orca, already finished with your rounds. For the moment, but I have to take my leave." The black behemoth's grovelly voice echoed through the room. "My last report went longer than expected." Edshot tensed despite himself, and Sakamoto Kuga noticed his menacing red eyes, while hard, sending a message towards his colleague not to worry himself. "It's nothing that you need to concern yourself with," Orca said, "a case back home that will require my attention. Focus on your shift after your break." Edshot felt his muscles relax. "Then I wish you the best of luck." "Thank you," Sakamoto replied as he walked over to his locker to collect his belongings. He looked solemn. Shinya made a note to ask around the sister agencies in Hasu, Orca's constituency, on what was going on. But moving on to a lighter topic, Edshot looked back at the screen. "How do you think the kids did?" He saw Orca look up at the TV, seeing Endeavor's son fire a massive glacier into the tower, followed by highlights of the various students engaging in battle in the streets. For the most part, passable. Edshot raised an eyebrow. "Catch something you didn't like?" Sakamoto was a man of few words when amongst friends and colleagues. He only went into detail when something of note intrigued him. "Many things," Orca admitted with closed his eyes. "By all rights, with the quirks available to them, the blue team should have taken this in a landslide. Even with the Americans' contributions. Parker or Tsunotori, they're both American. Both. Kurt is always Sakamoto. And here I thought it was pretty even throughout the match, even before it started," Shinya stated, gazing up at the screen as he got his thermos out and began to sip on some tea, pulling down his mask. "Kamahara, you're giving them both too much credit. The blue team was the objective favorites, and they ended up tying," the aquatic-themed hero said, taking a chair, causing the metal to groan under his weight. "The Bakugo boy has a powerful quirk, but he was hyper-focused. He charged in with only a handful of backup as if he expected to steamroll the entire team by himself. The red team had more chemistry as the war progressed, with that Yaoyorozu girl making those comm units to charge in blindly. Orca narrowed his eyes. Shinya didn't feel intimidated, but he can see why his colleague was voted in the magazines as a top candidate for most villainous-looking hero. It was a title Sakamoto loathed to the core. His foolishness of the highest order. I can think of a few times All Might did the same thing. Edgeshot argued with a shrug. Orca begrudgingly shrugged. HNN. Be that as it may, the tactic was more suited to the son of Endeavor than him. He at the very least is capable of overextending his quirk without harming himself, if what I've seen is any indication. By the end, Endeavor's kid didn't fire his ice as fast as in the beginning, and he still didn't seem to use his father's fire. Still, Edgeshot started, watching the purple-haired boy that tied the match sneak around the rocky areas of the enemy side. The rest of the teams performed admirably, to do so without a stealthy quirk in particular. He will need to tell his scouting departmenting about that General Ed kid. This Shinso Hitoshi. Parker took precedence. He was just that good. The pressure of protecting the bands and appearing valuable to the judges hindered some, Orca said bluntly. With the support girl's quirk, they should have seen any possible assaults coming from fields away. The red team were too cautious. Abrasive as Bakugo and Todoroki might be, an all-out assault from the blue team might have proven effective had they done something to prepare with the time that they did. They could have sent more capable attackers, even if it meant risking their silver knights. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, huh? Shinya mused. Being a hero is a risky job in of itself. Sakamoto got out his phone, looking down. You can't complete your goals or serve your community without making gambles. The blue team was too chaotic, and the red team too cautious and tentative, even with their calm units. Edgeshot nodded. The blue team looked more than a little on edge during the initial stages of the war. There was no audio, but the visuals painted a good enough picture of what planning with certain members must have been like. Bakugo roaring at the Monoma kid who turned out naked being the highlight as the other students looked flummoxed. Yet, even with the advantage of communication, the red team couldn't keep their bands protected. Highlights of Todoroki defeating Tsunotori and Sato played, along with Bakugo being able to thwart Midoriya, and Honuki at the cost of giving up the red golden band. A clever use of the Yaoyorozu's quirk, but inefficient. Orca growled as he pocketed his phone, and she made counters to her members' weaknesses or additional escape options instead of focusing on traps in her building. And that paintball arsenal of hers, the red team's groups might have been able to keep all of their bands. I know of several tactics they could use. I seem to remember her utilizing powder to stop Bakugo, Edgeshot pointed out. Plus they are children, not pros. A smart trap employee, yes, but she didn't trap the stairs leading to the Red King. That's on her, Orca countered, even when the Silver Knights were arguably more important than the King's band. Parker's abilities meant taking his band meant unleashing him on the battlefield. The blue team should have focused entirely on the Silver Knights and whittle them down, leaving their king helpless. Death by 1,000 cuts over a one-sure kill. Shinya mused with a raised eyebrow as he took one more sip of his tea, capping his thermos. You saw what happened when Parker was unleashed. If that boy took the game more seriously, he would have been able to maybe get Todoroki's band and get the winning score. Sakamoto closed his locker. I doubt he would have matched well with the blue team. Their king had a straight line from their fortress to the red tower. Unleashing him would have been as bad as Parker. Orca's voice lowered, his eyes looking to the ground as he removed his security badge. Edgeshot shrugged. It was fair enough reasoning. However, there was another, more interesting question that was eating at the ninja-themed hero. Any of them catch your eye? Before you go, the huge man hummed, a black finger scratching his chin, red eyes looking to the side in thought. Many have potential. The two members of the red team who spent the majority relaying the positions of the blue team seemed competent enough. Yaoyorozu and Jiru, that is. Parker goes without saying. Midoriya and Honuki seem decent, although they should have played a more active role far sooner than they decided to. Yourself, Edgeshot hummed for a moment. The general studies boy that tied the match, and the invisible girl were capable of getting through the enemy camps without being detected rather well. You're recruiting Parker too, aren't you? Edgeshot's head snapped to Orca. The killer whale hero gave a soft chuckle. Well, how can I not? You and everyone else who is going to flood UA's email inboxes. Orca nodded, gesturing to the screen showing the perplet. Sure enough, the information had him listed as just a member of the General Education Division of UA with a brainwashing quirk. How did he slip through the cracks? Ashamed for that Shinso. He might have done well in the hero course. Orca said he might still if they have any sense and replace any fools. He adjusted his tie. In any case, I need to get going. Edgeshot shrugged. Does Nezu know? Already informed him that I'm going to Hasu on my way back to Curato. He looked up at the screen, red eyes softening at the sight of Ida Tenya as he was talking with some of his blue comrades. Take care, Kamahara. The massive pro lumbered out of the break room, closing the door as Edshot looked up at the screen, seeing the arena being cleaned up. All of the students were treated for in the west and east tunnels, and the giant field of buildings and boulders began to sink into the earth as the stadium rumbled. The arena faded into darkness dozens of meters underground, and rising up was a new concrete square of sorts. Out on the field, Cementos was at work, shaping streams of liquid concrete into a pristine new arena. On the field around it, the last of the contestants were being freed from Todoroki's ice or carried away on stretchers. Soon, all would be ready for the next round. Though what would that involve? All right, listen up. It was midnight, once again taking center stage. Clearly the organizers were in no mood to waste time. Our tiebreaker event will be a sudden deathmatch between the two kings, Peterparker and Ida Tenya. Peter gulped and glanced at Tenya. The other boy did not look back, his eyes fixed on Midnight and the screen behind her. The faces of both Peter and Tenya appeared on screen, with a big versus sign in between. Here is a refresher for this tiebreaker event. The rules of this deathmatch are nice and simple. Midnight went on. If you cannot continue, or get knocked unconscious, or step outside the arena, it's over. Simple indeed. Peter might have been grateful if he wasn't so worried over having to fight Tenya. He liked his class secretary, and even if he hadn't, Ida had proven himself both capable and tenacious during the race. This wouldn't be easy, since the Idas come from a long line of heroes. Combat must be second nature to them. And a little something else. Midnight shot them a rather unsettling smirk. Whichever king wins, his team gets bonus points. So cheer for your king, all you middle-ranking contestants. Your chance to advance lies with him. Great, just great. Peter almost wilted as he felt his teammates' eyes upon him. Some of them were glowing. You can do it, Peter. Pony bounced on her hooves, flashing him a bright smile. Yes, growled Juzo, his seemingly pleasant smile ruined by the look in his eyes. He will bring us bonus points ... if he knows what's good for him. Quit that right now, Takoyami interjected. Fix your own problems before you complain. I didn't see much of you during this war. Same goes for you, buddy. Honuki Juzo's slitted eyes glared back at Takoyami. You just stayed back in the red tower acting all cozy while I had to do the dirty work. He showed his cut-up hands as proof. From your own classmate no less. Takoyami rolled his eyes. Izuku stepped in between the two, seeing a majority of the red attack team in stretchers with blankets on them. Guys, that's enough. Let's focus on cheering on Parker-san, he said, and his eyes were back on the American boy. He's right, Momo cut in. She turned to Peter and shot him a reserved but pleasant smile. Give it your all, Parker-san. Peter looked over towards the arena. Cementos had finished, and Tenya was on his way up there, his teammates shouting encouragement as they headed for the nearest tunnel. Thanks, I will. He gave Momo an awkward thumbs up, then strode towards the arena. As he reached the floor, the concrete still warm under his feet, Ida was waiting there, his face grim. I will act as ringside referee. Both myself and Midnight will oversee the match and we will intervene if it gets too far. Cementos raised a hand, looking at the two students. Do you have any questions? None, Tenya stated. Likewise, thanks Teach. Peter nodded, and the block-looking hero nodded back in turn, walking back to his chair by ringside, leaving the two in the arena. All right everybody, let me hear you say here. Present Mike shouted over the stadium, and the audience roared in approval and anticipation. Now that's an audience. Now, we begin with what is the outcome of many amazing fights to come in the tournament. Introducing from the blue team, from Hero Class 1 as Class Secretary. He comes from a long line of heroes. You almost has to ask, who is sent a hero and bears the Ida name? The always serious, studious and proto-calicious. Ida Tenya. Tenya didn't flinch during Present Mike's hype up. And introducing from the red team. Coming from Way of Queens, New York City, Usuva. He is a foreign exchange student who took UA by storm. He is the talk of the school, yet looks like he's so humble, nerdy, and bashful like that boy next door. He has taken this sports festival by the horns, putting up numbers not seen since our great All Might himself has walked in these halls. If you don't know him, you'll know him soon enough, folks. He's the web-slinging, wall-crawling, Spider-Man class representative of Hero Course Class 1A. Peter Parker. The audience roared, and Peter waved, letting out a light laugh. Did Present Mike have to go that far? Good God, all these eyes on him. It was different back in class, but he felt more at ease in the race and the war when it was more chaotic. Now, with this being so organized, it felt so suffocating. Think, Mr. Stark would just smile and wave. Yeah, just do that. And maybe invest in a pair of sunglasses. Mr. Stark always had extra copies. He turned towards Tenya, taking a deep breath. Well, guess we have to fight, huh? Peter mused awkwardly. To be fair, he really didn't want to have to do this. He had known all along that he might have to fight a friend, but not so soon as this. He wasn't ready. He hadn't had time to prepare himself. Yes, it is so, replied Tenya. I cannot deny my teammates a better chance at the finals, nor can I embarrass the Ada name by losing so soon. No, Parker-san, that I will fight you to the best of my ability. Much like with Midoriya, ever since we have met I have always lost to you. That is why I will win and make my family proud. He looked Peter straight in the eye. Peter realized that he wasn't half as intimidated as he thought he would be. Tenya didn't look at him with the hateful eyes of Bakugo or the coldness of Todoroki, or the smug arrogance of Monoma. It was with respect. I won't hold back either, he said. My teammates are depending on me too, and I can't let them down, not now. For a moment he saw something in Ida's eye, something like surprise or curiosity. Then it was gone. Then let us act in the way of honor and behave like true heroes. Tenya drew himself up. Peter Parker, show me the noble strength that brought you this far. At first, Peter felt silly. Who actually said things like that? But of course, in a world like this, one should say things like that. Fine, he declared. I will. He got his hands up and legs spread. Tenya knelt down, hands to the ground in a sprinter's position, eyes focused keen on the American. Our contestants are ready. Midnight raised her whip. Let this climax of the War of the Flags come to a close. King's Deathmatch. She brought it down, and the flames erupted behind Peter and Tenya at the corners of the ring. Begin. Tenya knew from the beginning, when he entered this arena, that from pure skill and talent, in conjunction with power, Peter Parker was his better in all but a straightforward sprint. Power, flexibility under pressure, reflexes. He saw it in action back in the battle trial and while watching the Jumbotron during the war. He will not last in a long fight. By long, Tenya knew in 10 seconds, Parker could beat him. Hiroshima and Tetsu were only able to last longer than a single punch in part due to the nature of their quirks. Todoroki, however, whenever he was struck by Parker, that would end the fight between them. In every engagement he has seen, in order to win, he needs to win it in an instant. To go plus ultra from the start, to catch him off guard. Recipro burst. His engines fired like rockets behind him. Tenya went off, charging towards him and closing the distance within the blink of an eye. Peter's eyes widened as he brought up his arms to defend, but even his reactions were too slow in the face of the Ida family legacy. Yes, this was it. He tackled Peter and charged forward towards the edge of the arena, Peter in his arms. Now to throw him out. Just one more second. Watch me, brother. I will claim victory. Tenya roared his determination, using everything he had. Every step sped him faster and faster, and right before he had to stop, he threw Parker with all he had just as his engine stalled. The negative effect of using his family's quirk-based technique. Recipro burst gave him breakneck speed to cross 100-meter distances in a flash, but it made the engines in his ankles peter out, forcing him to rest in order to recover. However, that only mattered if the match could be decided in an instant. The longest Tenya could manage in a single go was around 10 seconds. Pushing himself further, he could shorten the time to increase the overall speed. A risky maneuver, one he could barely keep track of. Yet there were heights that he needed to climb, and Parker wouldn't be beaten with anything else. With the increase in speed, Parker looked like he received a hit from a bullet train. Tenya could see the surprise and the pain flash across the American's face. He saw him grit his teeth and midair fire a line of webbing. The arena ledge was meters away. Then Peter pulled. His momentum from Tenya's throw dropped to nothing and gravity took hold. But not before his action pulled Tenya off the arena. The legacy of Ida hit the ground right as Parker did, and both boys could hear everyone catch their breath as they skidded on the ground before coming to a stop. They all looked to the Jumbotron, a frame-by-frame video playing for the world to see. Inch by inch, the webbing pulled him forward. And there, right at the end, Tenya hit the ground, a single frame before Parker. He lost. Tenya was the first out of bounds. Midnight declared, the winner by ring out is the Red King, Peter Parker. She raised her whip, and red fireworks blossomed across the stadium. WHOOA. Now that was fast. Like a duel between master samurai, the fight is over in the blink of an eye. Hope no one had to go get some refreshments. Ida almost had a ring out, but Parker turned the ropes on him and pegged him with webbing. Hell, you might have missed all of this if you even sneezed. I doubt a sneeze would cause you to miss that much. Tenya gasped and growled as he struggled, before sighing as the realization dawned on him. Even with Recipro burst and even catching Parker by surprise, it wasn't enough. He closed his eyes. His team has lost. He looked like a fool in front of his family. Hey man, okay, Parker spoke, his body blocking out the sun, giving the class secretary shade. He knelt down, checking in on the blue-haired boy. "I am fine, Parker-san, thank you." Parker shrugged, holding out a hand. "But dude, that was so awesome. You like zoomed off and all of a sudden I'm being tackled like a running back. Thought throwing a web line was worth a try, but man." He laughed. "I didn't even know your legs could do that at that power output. Couldn't even see a thing. Why didn't you tell me you had a built-in hyperdrive?" Tenya looked at his chest and couldn't help but give a rueful chuckle as he took it, and the shorter American boy helped him to his feet. His calves were killing him, but the pain will subside when he gets some rest and ice to cool down his motors. Standing side by side, Peter took his hand and raised it above his own head. The crowd seemed to roar and applause rang out at the show of good sportsmanship. "With any luck we'll see each other in the next round, Ida." Parker grinned, patting his shoulder. Tenya had a soft smile as he nodded. "Yes, you're right. But the next time we meet, I won't lose again." Parker chuckled and shook Tenya's hand as the fireworks continued to launch. "Bring it on, buddy." The two peers smiled as their grips tightened under the sun, respect blossoming like the fireworks overhead. And there you have it, folks. The results are in. The Kings have clashed and the red team has won the day. Mike screamed at the top of his lungs. Shouta didn't know how his eardrums managed to remain intact being so close to his colleague. He made a note to check with Recovery Girl later just in case there was any lasting damage. Going back to his job, his tired eyes watched Parker as he helped Tenya to his feet, much to the appreciation of the crowd. The two boys were living in the moment, smiling and waving, playing the crowd and their peers as they should. Knowing how to interact with the public was half the battle, and from what he'd shown so far, Parker was probably going to crash the UA servers with his offers. God help the teacher aides who checked the email if the boy got any further in the tournament. God help him if he had to listen to another one of the boy's quips, to which he said loads during the war. The tired-eyed teacher glanced at the schedule for the festival. With the random events finished, all that was left was the tournament. A simple one-on-one fight for the entertainment of the masses. Shouta never really understood it himself, but there was something about a fight that brought people together to watch. Maybe it was the primal part of our brains that loved to see one guy hit another, but it was basically the biggest reason that heroes and civilians alike watched this show. As impressive as the obstacle courses, and how demanding the second event might be, it was the tournament that gave people the clearest picture of what the students could do. The other two events, everything was flying around, distracting them. Now, there was nothing on the stage but two students and their quirks. During his tenure at UA, Shouta always remembered opting out of this portion, if ever he managed to get this far. He was better suited to underground quirks, so broadcasting his quirk to the world would have only made problems for him back then. Gave him an edge that he needed for the first couple of years, then word got around and things became difficult. Then again, most heroes have to live with that reality and it gave villains an edge for sure. He was thankful that the man that recruited him back when he was a first year noticed Shouta's decision and actions in the prior two events. He probably wouldn't even be here if it weren't for him. Back to the event of his making, the War of the Flags, he insisted that the tiebreaker for the War of Flags had to be a mock battle. Both kings got through to the final round, after showing all of their peers exactly what they were bringing to the table come the rounds. If they were smart, the students were already thinking of contingency plans for the former kings. Off the top of his head, he could see Midoriya already going through that notebook of his. Yaoyorozu probably started making a laundry list of things to counter the two. Bakugo, however, he'd be thinking of ways to give him distance. For all his bluster, Kid was smart. If he knew his stuff, he'd use his blast to knock either of the two out of the ring before they could close the distance. He began to think and reminisce on the war itself. The red team had the best chemistry, had communication all across the field, yet were only able to tie thanks to luck and mistakes made by the blue team. Peter should never have been on the ledge to expose himself to the enemy like that, as within the center of his king's ring atop of the 7-story building was his best chance of defense. When Bakugo freed him and was unable to get his band, Parker was a battlefield changer, able to sling across with amazing speed and mobility, to say nothing of his power when it came to shattering Todoroki's ice like plaster. Yet he still bumbled, joked, and quipped with both the enemy and his allies alike, and it infuriated Shouta to his core. He was so serious during the race. He showed the ceiling of what he could be if he focused, blocked all outside noise. Someone who can be the pinnacle of this generation for heroes. Yet during the war, he ran around like damn headless chicken. All that potential and promise, yet Parker displayed so much flaws and indecisiveness there that became evident when he fought Ida in the tiebreaker. Yaoyorozu was instrumental, providing defense and utility. Sui was the sole reason why the red team didn't get eliminated. Midoriya was decent in running point. Although their contributions were late, Sato and Tsunotori did a good job in giving the red team life in the closing minute. Sato with his assault on Todoroki with Midoriya and Ajiro, and Tsunotori for helping Shinso up the red tower towards Asui with the tying band. Jiru herself stood out amongst the red attackers however. The Class B boys were pretty mindless and straightforward, acting in accordance to the plans but doing little of value. The blue attackers minus Bakugo and Todoroki would have been handled by Yaoyorozu and Takoyami if they had infiltrated the tower. Shoji did decent in recon, but he was foolish to join the attack squad when he would have been more valuable with defense and support like Honuki. With the blue team, Shouta had a feeling that Vlad was going to be over the moon. Along with amazing showings from Tsunotori and the red team, Kendo and Shizaki were extraordinary, as was Takage. The fact that Kendo managed to salvage her team to make an incredible fortress using Uraraka and Shizaki's quirk, combined with her and Takage running communication with Hatsume's limited comm units, she did a great job in managing the personalities. It was a shame she was lured by Takage, who fell victim to Shinso's quirk. Otherwise she could have been an X-factor in the final push by the blue team to stop the general ed student. Hell, she could have gotten the game-changing defense with her adapting to Hatsume's support gear like fish to water. Shizaki herself excelled in her role as defender, although the girl may need some coaxing out of her pacifistic shell. Zero and Kaminari were idiots. Zero's move in cutting off a flank of the blue team was good in principle, but it was a useless time waster. He would have been key in helping with the defense of the Blue King's ring or acting in a utility or support role. Better yet, he should have stuck with Kaminari to prevent Kaminari's band from being taken. All he did was almost costing his team a victory instead of a tie, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Thankfully Hatsume pulled his ass from the fire. Zero's quirk and mobility had promise, and he showed his skills and how his practicing at the battle centers had paid off, but the boy will need to sharpen his mind when in the field. Kirishima was foolhardy, rushing in the blue attackers when he was a Silver Knight. While Aizawa knew that being a Silver Knight meant that the most mobile and powerful quirks were limited, and that some had to take the initiative, none on the red team so much as crossed the halfway line unless out of necessity. Case in point, Midoriya and Asui stopping Bakugo and retrieving the gold band at the cost of Midoriya's silver, but in the front from the beginning and leaving himself exposed, trapped, and eventually beaten multiple times. He will need to learn strategy over the summer, as will Ishido, who seems to follow his lead too often. And then there is Bakugo and Todoroki, and it made Shouta sigh in frustration. Those two alone would have won this war for the blue team if they put aside their egos and worked as a team in order to win. But it was clear they had grudges to sate, to take down the ace of Class 1A. This war was meant to show a sign of competitive and cooperative spirit, not degrade down to a dick measuring contest, which was as infuriating as Parker's personality given how powerful Todoroki and Bakugo were and how instrumental they were to the blue team. They were the only point scorers, and had they done the smartest thing and go over the red team's Silver Knights and not unleash Parker, the blue team would have won this handily. Still, this war gave him plenty of clues of how he improved his students. He felt proud in the efforts they gave, but they all needed to improve aside from a few. As a teacher, he felt content but was left wanting more. Then again, these are first years and he has room to work with. Of course, that was only a possibility if they came to blows. He heard a ding and glanced down at the center icon with his ashi. The judges' results. Nezu and the others got done fast it seems. Alright ladies and gentlemen, I know you've been on the edge of your seats, but wait no more. Dear listeners, mark your history books cause these are the competitors advancing to the next round. You could have just said the names, Shouta drawled. Each contestant was ranked on showings, helpfulness of the team, impact to the war, and finally their heroic acts. Let's take a look at the charts and see our competitors. Shouta and seemingly 1,000 people all turned to the Jumbotron. The massive screen cycled through the names for way too long, playing the crowd no doubt and wasting time while doing it. But alas, Shouta wasn't allowed to many decisions when it came to the theatrics of the festival. Something about not being able to set the mood, whatever that meant. Anyway, the images on screen finally slowed to stop, displaying the names of the competitors as well as their positions in seemingly random order. Peterparker, Ida Tenya, Bakugo Katsuki, Todoroki Shoto, Yaoyorozu Momo, Midoriya Izuku, Kendo Itsuka, Shizaki Ibara, Pony Tsunotori, Asui Tsuyu, Jiru Kyoka, Takoyami Fumikage, Takage Setsuna, Hatsume Mei, Sato Rikido, Shinso Hitoshi. The sight of the names were enough to send the crowd into a roaring cheer. Far too loud as normal, but Shouta slumped in his seat and bore with it. cause it was only going to get worse. And there you have it, our wonderful 16 competitors that will take this festival straight into Plus Ultra. But those who didn't make it, don't you fret, we've got a special event planned for each and every one of you. Please head in for the break, and when we return, our rough and roaring competitors will draw lots and get this party started. But until then, a word from our sponsors and a 1-hour lunch break before our special event and then the tournament. I don't think they heard you, Shouta muttered. Hisashi came back with another radio-friendly remark, but Shouta turned him out, as he always did a lot back since their high school days. He had better things to do than listen to him go off, like taking a look at the list for example. At first glance, he didn't have many complaints about who was allowed into the final round. Their showings in the war as well as the obstacle course spoke for themselves. Still, he was surprised that Honduki got left out while Sato got in. Perhaps the judges saw Honduki's body language towards Parker afterward, while they took into account Sato had defended Pony when Todoroki attacked them, along with Sato being the difference between the blue team tying and the red tower being smothered again in a giant mountain-sized glacier. Some would probably be hoping for the luck of the draw, have the powerhouses take each other down and leave them tired for the next round. Endurance was always a challenge for most heroes. Fights could go on for hours or even days sometimes. That being said, they couldn't just hope for the best when chances were high that they would be going against the powerhouses of the year. Bakugo, Todoroki, Parker. Those three are going to be nightmares no matter who they fought, even if they fought one another. Hopefully whatever reservations the students had about fighting more powerful foes was kicked out of them back at the USJ. Horrible as it was, some of them needed to know that they can't just run from those more powerful than them. Shouta reached instinctively for his sleeping bag with his good hand. "Hey Eraser, you gonna get some food?" Hisashi asked with a big grin. Shouta was already in his super comfortable sleeping bag. He noticed Todoroki, sullen and grim-faced, approaching Midoriya. Curious, but for now, too bad. Taking a nap, Shouta let himself fall down, his sleeping bag cushioning his fall. Thank God for Detonaret for making these. He didn't feel a jolt of pain through his body as he landed like a pillow. He closed his eyes and tuned out Hisashi's whining as he let sleep take him. Maybe instead of War of the Flags, next year it will be Battle of the Bands. More he thought of it. Heading back into the arena from the stands, Izuku couldn't stop shaking. He'd made it. The boy who a year ago didn't even have a quirk was competing with the best of the best and making it all the way to the final round. Just like All Might told him to do, he was telling the world that he was here. Though his heart went out to those that didn't make it. The greatest stage that a young hero could ask for, and the best chance to show what they could do, was denied from them. They were probably devastated. Aw man, I was really looking forward to showing off. Yeah, Momo got me good. Izuku blinked once, twice at Uraraka's almost laissez-faire reaction to not being chosen. "You Uraraka, you're okay with this?" he meekly asked. The round-faced girl shrugged. Yeah, I'm upset." She then straightened up, beaming. "But hey, there's always next year. Besides, I'd like to think I did a good job," she said, smiling confidently. "I'll have to work extra harder in the non-finals event." "Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer," a new voice said. The two of them glanced over to find Kirishima lazily walking towards them, resting his arms behind his head. He then grinned. "But hey, you gotta admit, this is going to be an awesome tournament. You kicked ass out there, Midoriya." Izuku shrank from the praise. Well, I only did my best." "You shouldn't be so down, Midoriya-chan," Asui added, coming up from behind. "You clearly did well. If the judges thought you deserved to go forward, so you did. Honestly, I'm kinda mad. Ida-kun was hiding that secret move from us for so long," Uraraka said, mimicking the boy's running form, albeit quite poorly. "Aren't you supposed to keep those things a secret though?" Sato questioned, Kaminari dumbly nodding his head from his overcharge. "Midoriya." Izuku stopped immediately. He, along with a few others, glanced around them to see Todoroki leaning against the wall. The dual quirk boy ignored everyone there, his gaze solely on the secret successor, arms crossed. Izuku bit his lip. "Todoroki, did you need something?" he asked. "Yes, a word. We have something we need to talk about. Have a minute." It was just them now, standing in a hallway deep in the stadium leading to the outside. Before him, leaning against the wall, was a stoic Todoroki Shoto. Izuku bit the inside of his cheek in nervousness. Todoroki asked him if he wanted to talk, and he obliged. After all, this was all just a game in the end, and the hostility Todoroki had before during the war was gone. "So, you wanted a minute. You got it?" Izuku asked, willing to hear his classmate out. He was silent, eyes boring into him. We should hurry it up. Like, the kiosks and vendors will be getting huge lines before long." And Todoroki's brown and green eyes hardened into a glare, and Izuku clammed up. His eyes were the same, if not worse than back during the war. Yet it wasn't annoyance as it was anger. Yet the anger wasn't directly at him, as Kaken's normal daily rantings and fury seemed to be filled of. Kaken's anger was like a raging bonfire, Todoroki a biting blizzard. You fought well, you and Parker. You overwhelmed me. Todoroki spoke, hands in pockets. You both were so strong. You made me break my vow. Izuku perked up, first heart skipping at the praise, but then his logical side picked up how Todoroki had a vow. That's right. Todoroki never used his left side during the war willingly. That would have made him even more powerful had he used it, but he didn't. In fact, he's never seen him use it. From what the green-haired boy saw in the highlights leaving the stadium and on the TVs in the hallways, Parker forced Todoroki to use his left side as a defensive measure when he was taking Sato and Tsunotori's flags. You've heard it too, don't you? Todoroki asked, looking at his left hand. How the people in the stands were comparing Parker to All Might. Izuku gulped, ignoring the suddenly growing pit in his stomach. How could he not? The one who helped him control his quirk. Someone who called him cool and was willing to help him and even give him points to get into UA. Someone who he was more than happy to call a friend was the closest to being All Might. More than he, Midoriya Izuku. All Might's true successor. Parker didn't even have one for all or a flashy and noticeable quirk, and yet he was able to do so many incredible things. All while joking around too. When we faced off before the Red Tower, the same threat and pressure I felt from Parker, I felt it from you as well. Todoroki looked back at Izuku. So, I have to ask you a question. A question? What kind of question? Izuku's mind ran rampant. What could he be wanting to ask? Oh no, did he figure it out? He's only told Kaken, and even then Kaken didn't believe him. Did Todoroki overhear back then? Oh no, what has he done? Have you been training with Parker, and under All Might as well with him? Wait, that's it. Izuku was floored. Well, he's not half wrong. Well, more like a quarter wrong. Izuku stammered as he waved his hands. Well, to be truthful, me and Parker-san have trained a little bit. He helped me control my quirk, Izuku declared, trying to calm himself as Todoroki's eyes narrowed. And for the second part, though, and not at all. I mean, All Might is an amazing hero. I'm sure he doesn't have the time to waste on me. God, he sounded so lame. Lying is not his strong suit. He's never asked why All Might decided to teach in UA. His original answer was so that he can find a successor. Izuku's eyes widened. Was Parker his intended successor before he met him? No, that wouldn't make sense. Parker is incredible as a hero in training. Yet, he also had taken part in a vigilante incident during Mount Lady's debut. His eyes looked to the side, the gears in his head moving as he had a hand to his chin and thought. You see it then? Todoroki asked, picking up. I'm not saying he's All Might's bastard child, but there is a connection. The symbol of peace is getting up there in years. So what better than to train a successor at the place he first began to be a hero? He asked, eyes staring directly into the green-haired boy. Izuku looked back, doing his utmost not to look nervous, which was looking terrible given how the red-white-haired boy rolled his eyes. Still, even if All Might trained Parker, I will beat him, as I will beat you, Midoriya. I can tell you've spoken some matter of truth, but I have the feeling you're still hiding something from me. He leaned back against the wall. You know of my old man, right? Endeavor. How could I not? He's the #2 hero in Japan. The Flame Hero. Izuku could tell that Todoroki bristled by the movement of his lip. Top 10 worldwide. Todoroki added. But, let's stick to national rankings. The fact that you and Parker may have connections to the #1 hero, and me to the #2. Well, he shrugged. All the more reason to defeat you. He looked to the side, eyes narrowed. My old man has gone all out to make a name for himself as a hero. Fame, wealth, status. He has all of this, gunning for the top spot, but All Might's denied him time and again. Then he had an epiphany, you see, that he can't beat the #1 hero on his own, so he came up with a plan. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hand. What plan? Izuku asked. Why are you telling me all of this, Todoroki? This was all so out of the blue. Connections to Parker, and speaking of his father, what was his end game here? The ice user exhaled. You've heard of quirk marriages, right? Todoroki asked, and Izuku perked up. Yeah. Izuku nodded, face looking grim. During the second generation of the Age of Quirks, they were springing up like crazy. Strong people would force a partner into a marriage whether they liked it or not, all for the purpose of... He paused, trailing off as he put the picture together. Todoroki has ice powers and fire powers, which means making stronger offspring from the combined quirks of the parents. Like me, Todoroki muttered darkly. My mother's family was chained in gambling debts. My grandpa on that side wasn't exactly the smartest tool in the shed, and lo and behold, like a knight in shining armor. He sneered. Dear old dad comes in with a deal. He spoke that term like a curse. Marry a certain daughter, and he pays off the debts and gives them luxury and wealth enough to last a generation and change. He glared at the ground. They jumped on it, throwing their daughter to an unloving marriage, all for familial piety and to get out from their own mistakes. Todoroki looked back up at Izuku. All that trouble, just to get his hands on my mother's quirk. He bared his teeth, looking back to the ground as he had a hand go up to his scarred face. He raised me to be a hero to surpass and beat All Might. All because he couldn't, he tries to do so by using me. I hate it. The white red-haired youth ranted. I'm not his son. I'm only his tool for his damn ambitions. He calmed down, taking a deep breath. I still remember her. Mom's crying. Izuku's heart clenched, his blood going cold the more he's heard Todoroki vent to him. Has he had no one to vent this to? No adults, no siblings, she said. That left side of yours. I can't stand it. He removed his hand, showing his burned scar making on his face, before dumping scalding water on my face. Izuku's jaw dropped. How awful. In short, the plan was for me to never use my left side. To be a hero using only my right, to spite that monster who calls me his father. Todoroki Shoto looked up, eyes burning with a controlled and focused rage. I will deny him the pleasure of trying to live through me, and I will get to the top using only my ice. And yet, both you and Peterparker made me break that vow out of instinct. He scoffed. I bet he's laughing right now. But no more. Those times were just aberrations. He focused his glare on the boy. Izuku almost wilted under the glare, but more than that, the story Todoroki had just laid over him. That kind of mentality, that toxicity. It wasn't right. Todoroki, Izuku spoke out, and the ice user paused. Izuku was shaking, biting his lip. The words he spoke, along with the manner, a part of him understood, yet he couldn't fathom what it must have been like. The second most popular hero in all of Japan, doing something like that to his own family, just to see All Might taken off the #1 spot. But this, none of it was right. The sound of Present Mike's voice filtered through the hallways, the cheers of the crowd roaring in approval following it, cutting in before Izuku had anything to say as the green-haired boy couldn't find the words. Todoroki finally looked away from the real successor. It sounds like they've cleared the field, he finally said before turning back to him, eyes as hard as steel as he bore into the green-haired boy. Midoriya Izuku, you're strong. You keep getting stronger too, I admit that. Izuku eyes widened, heart skipping. That's why I want to beat you, and beat the best in this class. Peterparker, I will surpass you both. Don't you forget that. With those chilling words, the boy started to wander off, leaving a silent Izuku in the stadium hallway. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 9. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.